Chapter 1194. Many years later, perhaps many years later, Yun Nuoshing had never heard of the heavenly light world in the future. Perhaps it was because they had not survived the disaster at the end of the era. However, it was still far away from that time. In the future, most of the warriors who had survived the turmoil and calamity in the heavenly light world had retired. Perhaps they were tired of everything after that battle and only wanted to live the rest of their lives peacefully. Another portion was still fighting in the void and resisting the abyssal death fog. Some people had gone very far and had reached a very high level in their lifetime. No matter which one it was, they would occasionally stop what they were doing and could not help but recall that battle, that scene that was hailed as a legend. The golden sun and colorful energy radiance shone on every corner of the heavenly light world. The entire world was immersed in light. The colorful radiance that was constantly expanded without limit, bringing with it a power that could engulf everything in the world. Around the colorful radiance, the void turned into nothingness and everything turned into ashes. It was as if the eight elements world was collapsing towards this light from the inside. The golden sun that was dancing at the side released an extremely holy radiance, as if it was foretelling the rebirth of this world. Destruction and rebirth happened at the same time. The colorful radiance engulfed all the abyssal death fog, and the heavenly light world that was already riddled with holes stabilized under the illumination of the holy radiance. Everything returned to balance. In the end, without any warning, the colorful radiance disappeared. It was as if the world had been created and exploded outside the heavenly light world, becoming a salute to celebrate the end of everything and the rebirth of this world. Everything had come to an end. To this war, yes, it had already ended. However, the war that was so long that it was almost eternal was still ongoing outside. However, that was a different topic. Yun Nuoshing and Hui did not know how the people of the heavenly light world felt. One of them was responsible for blocking the door, while the other was responsible for purification. Hui performed exceptionally well and purified the energy node into the core of the purification domain, completely dispelling the abyssal death fog, the manifestations, and the faint haze in the heavenly light world. After that, Yun Nuoshing blasted the abyss death fog that was still watching from the outside into nothingness. The two of them carried the repaired heaven light world and escaped, sending it to the upper planes. After the war ended, the heavenly light world seemed to have held an unprecedented carnival. Perhaps it was also to dilute the sadness left behind by the war. In any case, the two of them did not participate. They hurriedly bid farewell to LV Tianguang and left. However, before they left, they still gave him a small blessing. Even though the war was far from over and the enemies entrenched in the depths of the void were still mercilessly wreaking havoc, to the people of the heavenly light world, this was already a victory. They had a reason and a need to hold a carnival that was appropriate for them. Then, they would return to the right path at an appropriate time. Those who were fighting would continue fighting, and those who were farming would continue farming. The truth of the world was that all developments would return to the ordinary daily life. All extraordinary and unusual things were nothing more than waves in the great river, and everything would return to peace in the end. Although the waves caused by the abyss death fog were a little too big, to the extent that the mountains, rivers, and seas became a monstrous flood that drowned the world. Those more troublesome things were things that they would have to think about in the future. At least for now. Then what should they do now? It had been almost 4 hours since they followed the big guy out, and all around them was the dark void and innumerable world luminous clusters. This place had yet to be affected by the abyssal death mist, at least not for the time being, which was a cause for celebration. However, there would always be a time when it would be destroyed, just like the void they had just passed. It was a middle plane, filled with corpses that had been melted and disintegrated by the void, as well as innumerable broken world luminous clusters. Innumerable substances and rules were filling the endless void, without stirring a single ripple. The abyss death fog had already spread to the middle plane, but their progress was not a perfect circle. There would be strong resistance in some places. For example, the Heaven Light world resisted the Abyss Death Fog for 2 months until all the worlds around it were destroyed. If the two of them did not go, the Heaven Light world would have been destroyed in the Abyss Death Fog sooner or later. Fortunately, they made it in time. "Phone, when will that big guy stop?" Huey's soft voice pulled Yun Nuashing out of the state of wild thoughts. He raised his eyes slightly and looked at the Supreme Sua who was slowly walking forward in the void. He also felt a little confused. This was the depths of the void, a very, very deep place. If the area of the upper plane, middle plane, and lower plane was a large concentric circle, the upper plane was the circle, and the other 2 planes were the belts around the upper plane. If the void was such a layout, of course, it was more complicated in reality. Let's just treat it as such for now. They should have now bypassed the upper plane in the middle, which was the important gathering place of the 8 elements world in the void. They came to the middle plane on the other side. There was a group of worlds that had not been destroyed. The Abyss Death Fog had not reached here yet. Around them were colorful world light balls, just like the stars in the galaxy. Very few of them could feel what was happening in the void. They would only wake up when death came and then fall into death, just like the price of awakening. Who knows where he's going? Yun Nuashing yawned lazily and held the back of his head with his hands. The two of them followed closely behind the Supreme Being for 100 miles, neither close nor far. He did not seem to notice them, or he did not want to pay attention to them. After the Abyss Death Fog in the Heaven Light world was cleared and the countless Abyss Death Fog outside were blown up by Yun Nuashing using the power of the Heavenly God of Origin, Suya, the Supreme Being, left the Heaven Light world and walked to the other side of the void. The two of them could not figure out what he was thinking and what he wanted to do. His body was still surrounded by the extremely dense Abyss Death Fog, which had been completely assimilated. Until now, they still could not figure out whether he was dead or alive. Previously, they had subconsciously treated him as a dead person because the two of them felt that he should have died long ago after being transformed into such a state by the Abyss Death Fog. His aura permeated the void, and the aura of the peak of the origin was constantly changing the void. He seemed to be doing something, but they could not see the trajectory. The vast void was also blocked by countless numbers. Even if he passed by many world light clusters, no one could sense all of this. Only the 2 spectators in the void were looking at him, watching him walk away step by step, not knowing where he was going. Hui looked at the Supreme Being in the distance thoughtfully. His gaze inadvertently swept past the feet of the Supreme Being several times, and then glanced at the void around him. These movements were somewhat weak, and he did not deliberately hide them, so they were noticed by Yun Nuashing. However, the latter did not ask anything. She could not find anything to ask, so there was nothing to talk about. The void was dead silent. The Supreme Being walked in front, and the two of them followed behind him. Yun Nuashing stretched her back and lazily said, "There are still things to do. I still haven't taken care of Suya in the void. If I don't pick him up, I'm afraid that he will really be melted in the void." Hui glanced at her, then at the Supreme Being. Sensing the fluctuations of the void around him, he couldn't help but frown. "I'm actually more concerned about this Supreme Being's movements. Suya won't disappear for a while. They have already survived the initial calamity and the calamity that has lasted for countless years. This time, to them, it can't even be considered as an upheaval, so it won't affect them much. But I'm a bit uneasy. Let's observe a bit more." "What did you think?" Yun Nuashing turned her head to look at his thoughtful expression and asked. Hui rubbed his chin and pondered for a while. Then, he shook his head and said, "It's hard to say. It might not be what I think. Let's observe for a while. If it's really what I think, I'm afraid I'll think of more things. To avoid burning my brain, it's better not to think too much." Yun Nuashing scratched her head and looked puzzled. "When did you start to speak halfway?" "I learned it from you." Hui said matter-of-factly. Yun Nuoshing. She glanced at him but did not say anything. There were countless things in the void, and it was impossible for him to have come into contact with all of them. It was very normal for him to see strange things. However, this little fluctuation made him feel uneasy. His heart actually started to beat faster. He was actually a little nervous, and even he himself was a little scared. It had been many years since he had felt this kind of feeling of looking forward to something but not daring to imagine it. What was he looking forward to? He did not know. He did not know at all. It was a reaction that originated from his body. He was naturally looking forward to something, waiting for something to appear in front of him. He was also a little scared. A weak energy fluctuation swept across the void. It was a very normal energy fluctuation, and not the death mist of the abyss. The Most High walked left and right. Sometimes he would go around a certain place once or twice. He seemed to be walking casually in the void, but in fact, Yun Nuoshing could not see anything special about it. He just felt that the Most High would not waste his time here. It was not easy for him to come back alive, so why not take a look at the beautiful mountains and rivers of his hometown? Stop! Hui suddenly said in a very strict tone. Yun Nuoshing subconsciously stopped and turned his head, only to find that the former was staring at the Most High. The voice of the rules spread out, letting him know that this sentence was directed at the Most High in the distance. If you continue walking, there will be no turning back. This void will disappear with your movements. No one can go there, not even to take a look. That is an untouchable, forbidden land. Stop now, before everything goes out of control. Hui warned in a serious tone. Yun Nuoshing glanced at him and played along. Stop. Even if we go there, only death awaits us. Even if you go there in this state, you will not survive. It is not too late to go back now. Although his words were very righteous, he had no idea where the Most High was going, and did not know where Hui was talking about. The Most High turned a deaf ear to their words. He continued to walk in the void step by step, slowly and unhurriedly, as if he had lost his soul. Yun Nuoshing shrugged. Pretend you didn't hear anything. Hui sighed. His expression suddenly became very serious, so serious that he seemed to be planning to do something. At this moment, the Most High suddenly stopped. He really stopped. It was not that their eyes were playing tricks on them, but they were both stunned. This guy actually stopped? It doesn't matter. Anyway, I won't be able to survive today. In this final moment, I just want to see the place that I have been pursuing all my life, the place that I could not see until I finally fell. This was the first time he had spoken, showing a rather high level of rationality. Yun Nuoshing and Hui were both stunned. During the battle just now, this guy was extremely violent and did not have the slightest bit of rationality. Now, he actually came back to his senses? His huge body standing in the void slowly shrank as he continued to walk forward. In the end, he returned to a heroic figure with black hair like a waterfall. His body was still surrounded by the abyssal death mist, but his eyes were shining with the light of divinity. It was a pair of eyes that had seen through the world. He still retained his rationality. I had already died many years ago. I never thought that the abyssal death mist would transform me and bring me back to life. I have become neither human nor ghost. The Most High looked down at his own hand as the path beneath his feet continued. Thank you, heavenly deities of the divine realm. You have awakened the last bit of power that I left on Sua. That power is currently cleaning up the remaining abyssal death fog on Sua. The void is an excellent graveyard, most suitable for burying them. Yun Nuoshing and Hui looked at each other, and immediately thought of the scepter's consciousness. Hui immediately understood. Hui took a step forward. It's nothing. We are very interested in that world, cough. Do you really want to do this? I have to do this. That is my long-cherished wish. The arrival of the abyssal death mist and the underworld has destroyed everything. There is no more hope. At least before my soul is torn to shreds. I want to see the shadow of the thing that I have been pursuing all my life. The Most High shook his head. You can reincarnate and come back in your next life. Why do you have to bet on the next life so easily? Yun Nuoshing crossed her arms and said softly. The Most High shook his head lightly and sighed. Next life? Hell, what next life is there to talk about? Those who were tainted by the abyssal death mist and died from it have all gone to the underworld to reincarnate. But I, who was killed by the underworld, have completely lost the right to reincarnate. There will no longer be a place for me in this world in the future. Yun Nuoshing narrowed her eyes. As expected, he was killed by the underworld, and his soul was completely destroyed by a forbidden technique. In terms of laws and order, he was completely destroyed. He had no next life to speak of. At this moment, what was left in his body was only a mixture of a huge amount of divinity and consciousness. What happened back then? We knew that he could not stop it, so he changed the topic. Nothing special. The Most High shrugged and smiled. They attacked and used the abyssal death mist as a passage to descend. At first, it was only the heavenly god-tier beings that came. Later, it was the heavenly god of origin. I fought my way through the abyssal death mist to their territory and saw everything. Then, I was killed by an even more powerful underworld being, and my soul was destroyed. Before I died, I threw part of the information into the void. I don't know if anyone could find out about it. The corner of Yun Nuoshing's eyes twitched. So, it was this ruthless person who killed his way into the underworld, and he was the one who spread the information. It was a pity that no one seemed to know about it in the end. It was only after dozens of eras that Azurite found out about it and told it to him. However, it did not matter if they knew about it or not. At most, they would know who they were fighting. The underworld's power was very strong, beyond their imagination. There was no way they could fight against it. Did you see it clearly? Is that really the underworld? Hui asked cautiously. It's the same as the legends. There's no problem. The Most High nodded vigorously. There are heavenly gods of that level? The Most High was silent for a few seconds. Then, he nodded and said, Yes, and there's more than one. Hui was horrified. What Yun Nuoshing had told him was true. It wasn't that he didn't believe him, but he didn't want to believe it. He didn't want to face reality, because if this matter was true, they wouldn't have any power to fight back. So he had been praying and running away. Now, there was a witness who had been there and then came back to tell him this matter, which had completely confirmed this matter. All of this couldn't be avoided, all of this resistance. Perhaps it was meaningless. Yun Nuoshing patted Huey's shoulder. When he saw Huey's shaky expression, he knew that the guardian had thought of many things in a short time. He could not help but sigh. To be honest, he also felt a little discouraged. Heavenly God of the primeval beginning, these 4 words were like a river of stars pressing down on the world. There was no heavenly God of this level in the immortal world, nor in the 8 elements realm. Under the pressure brought by these 4 words, it seemed that there was no way to save them. It was fine if there was, but there was more than one. There was no way to fight on the same stage. This was a one-sided crushing. It was an absolute deadlock. There was no way to solve it. Did you go there to seek hope? Or? Hui looked at the Most High. Hope? The Most High sneered and shook his head. There is no hope. No matter what you do, it is like a mayfly trying to shake a tree. The more you struggle, the more you can live. But what's the use? I am more desperate than you. When I knew that there was a heavenly God of this level in the underworld, when I plunged into the underworld's headquarters, I knew that everything was over. In the end, I still ended up like this. He spread his hands and shrugged. He was silent for a while, and then he continued to walk forward. I just want to take a look. There's nothing there, there's no hope there, there's only even greater despair, there's an even deeper and darker despair hidden there. I just wanted to take a look. That's all. He adjusted his state to the peak state that he had never been able to reach before. His aura was extremely frightening, even stronger than Yun Nuoxing and Hui at this moment. His eyes were bursting with the light of energy. They were all familiar with this state. This was a means to strengthen oneself to the extreme. It was the last fight to destroy jade and common stone. Fight with everything, gamble with everything. An item floated out from his body. It was a fragment of a piece of some artifact. It was only the size of a palm. The aura of time flowed endlessly. It was like the aura of the Sea of Time. It penetrated the Sea of Time of the Deyuan realm. From it, one could even feel the aura of time that exceeded the total time of the Deyuan realm by dozens of times. The key! Hui exclaimed. No wonder you dared to go there. We are here to help you. Whether you succeed or fail, we will leave it to fate. Feng, come and help me! Hui shouted loudly. His aura was also raised to the limit. Only Yun Nuoxing was dumbfounded. She had no idea what the two of them were doing. However, when she heard his voice, she quickly responded. She slowly stretched out her right hand. Huge, overlapping, and layered formations appeared out of thin air in the void. Endless power of the void was extracted and poured into the formations. This part of the void collapsed. There was even a land of nothingness in the distance. The Most High nodded heavily. His hands slowly formed a seal. The fragment that seemed to carry the aura of the entire Sea of Time rotated and landed in front of him. As it buzzed softly, the void collapsed. It was as if there were movements of creation and destruction bursting forth. Energy spontaneously condensed, just like the scene of the creation of heaven and earth. Boom! There was no excessive narration or description. The three of them launched their strongest attacks at the same time, striking the fragment into the void that was meticulously arranged. A strange scene of the creation of heaven and earth burst forth before their eyes. It was as if there were the birth and destruction of the heavens and myriad realms like the rising and falling tides. The void flickered incessantly. Bang! Endless energy storms squeezed out from every corner of the void. They squeezed out from the cracks in the void, revealing a vertical crack that was about 1,000,000 miles wide. It was not a passageway, nor was it a teleportation place. It was just a crack in the corner. Carried perhaps the most terrifying thing in this world. When Yun Nuoxing saw it, her eyes widened. In the next second she was hit by a terrifying void impact. She let out a muffled groan, and the three of them were sent flying. With a hurried glance, she saw the thing in the crack, a vast and endless energy storm, as well as that crack in the void. That vertical crack was not pierced by the three of them. It was just a scene that appeared when they used a key to open something. That was what they saw after opening the door, a crack in the void that had been formed a long, long time ago. There was also a never-ending energy storm. Endless energy radiance burst forth from the big crack in the void. It was like a fountain of energy. There were countless energy auras, endless divinity that was so powerful that it made them feel suffocated. That kind of law, that kind of violence, there were many other things mixed within. However, they could not be seen in detail. Just a breeze that blew out from the crack in the void almost injured the three strongest people of this era. That is my burial ground, the Most High said softly. The abyssal death fog on his body was almost completely eliminated. It was almost completely purified by the breeze just now. At this moment, his life was connected with the abyssal death fog. If the latter disappeared, his life that was lingering on at death's door would also completely come to an end. Yun Nuoxing swallowed his saliva and stared at the big crack in the void in the distance. He knew what it was. Before he went to the Suya continent, he had inadvertently talked with Hui and the others. Just a few short sentences, buried in the depths of the distant void, there was an eternal and indestructible divine destruction storm, that was the place where the first great deity fell. Chapter 1195. That is where I will be buried, the place that I have been pursuing all my life, but in the end, I have only found a grave for myself. So beautiful, so dazzling. The endless storm of divinity is the place where this world will never die, the scar of eternal destruction, the wound of the great Yuan realm. The last trace left behind by the origin great deities. Yun Nuoshing looked at the large crack in the void in the distance. The crack was not fixed, and it was just exposed in front of him. However, no matter how he looked at it, it was a huge crack. Many small cracks the size of planets spread out around the wide crack, and the inside of the crack was covered in light. It looked like a storm, like a hurricane, but it was not foggy. He could see the traces of the flow of energy, rushing from left to right. The weak wind of energy that accidentally leaked out from the crack turned a huge area of the void into nothingness. Just that gust of wind alone contained an indescribable energy that could kill the three of them countless times. The storm contained many kinds of energy, hundreds, or even thousands of auras. Yun Nuoshing could not distinguish those energies in detail. At first, they must have been separated from each other, or even hostile to each other. However, after countless years of evolution, they had all fused together, and he could still tell that there were faint changes in them. He tried to analyze any of the energy auras, and just this thought made the alarm in his heart ring wildly. After hesitating for a long time, he still did not try that suicidal action. The place where the origin great deities fought. To put it bluntly, it was the place where they had fallen. At least, that was what Yun Nuoshing thought. If it was not the place where they had fallen, how could the existences that protected the great Yuan realm allow such a scale of battle to remain here? Is this the place where that scene was born? Yun Nuoshing murmured in his heart. He had seen that scene before, the eye of the ocean that had transformed into a human. He had seen that scene from its memories. That scene of the creation of the world. Perhaps it had torn the world of light where the realm of the gods was located into pieces at that time, and the excess energy had left behind this big crack that pierced through the void. There was no mistaking it. The power of laws and chaotic energy were not something that the heavenly origin god could possess. The truth was that the heavenly origin god was the origin god, and coupled with that unprecedented divinity. Yes, this was definitely the last trace that they had left behind. The endless divine light dissipated, and the energy of their explosive attack was exhausted. The aftershock spread far and wide in the void before quietly disappearing. The void returned to its deathly stillness once again, leaving only the huge crack that pierced through the void and the endless storm that swept through it. One could vaguely hear the sound of the wind in their ears. They seemed to be standing in front of the crack, listening to the sound of the eternal storm blowing past their ears, listening to the news mixed in the sound of the wind, as if it was telling them something. "What are you talking about?" It was impossible to hear it clearly. In fact, no one was speaking. It was just a hallucination. They mistakenly thought that the wind of rules was someone's whisper. The Most High Being walked into the energy storm, but it didn't cause any ripples. The storm didn't stop, and it wouldn't stop. His figure was instantly submerged, and only the black fragment was left floating beside Yun Nuoshing. A bleak life. After a long time, Hui let out a long sigh and crossed his arms. I thought that it would be rare to have someone to gossip with. The eternal brilliance is just a gorgeous firework in the end. It will be difficult for anyone to see it in the future, and it will disappear in the endless sea of time. Yun Nuoshing turned his head. He didn't know what happened to the Most High Being. Other than the key, there was nothing left. The outcome might not be too important. Walking into that place, what other consequences could there be other than death? Eternal loneliness. Yun Nuoshing's eyes dimmed slightly. He looked at the huge crack in the void that was slowly closing. He felt a wave of sadness in his heart. Who was he sad for? Who was he hurting? He did not know. Perhaps it was for himself, or perhaps it was for others, but in the end, he calmed down completely. Looking at the history of the great origin realm, countless generations of people, some of them had a stunning life, some of them had a tragic life. In the end, the only outcome was to become an ice-cold character in eternal loneliness, recorded by others and kept in the memories of others. At the end of time, no one could escape the fate of being forgotten. Feng, don't sigh anymore. We patted him on the shoulder and tilted his head to look at the void. The big crack was completely closed, and the void returned to silence. That God's destruction storm was once again buried in the void. No one would see it, and no one would remember it. The Most High Being had already perished many years ago. The gorgeous fireworks that belonged to him had already bloomed. At this moment there was no longer any sound of him. We still have to deal with the matter of Sua. Yun Nuashing nodded. Now was indeed not the time to think about this. There was still a lot of mess to deal with. For example, the continent that had been thrown into the void. Perhaps we also wanted to clean up the remaining abyss death fog and the large number of manifestations on the Sua continent. He didn't care. He just needed to do something. Send the Sua continent back to its original place, or bring it back? Yun Nuashing was stunned by his words. He only reacted after a while. The Sua continent had been thrown into the void, far away from the world light that was used as the core of control. Let's go there first. Yun Nuashing shook his head. This was an unexpected situation. I didn't think that the entire continent would be thrown out. Hui nodded. Yun Nuashing slowly opened the portal. Both of them secretly glanced at the place where the huge crack in the void had disappeared. Their emotions were somewhat complicated. This was also the first time they had seen that place. It would be a lie if they said they weren't curious. However, they couldn't just let go of everything and rush into that place like the Most High Being. That was a dead end. No one could withstand the gods' destruction storm there. The peak heavenly gods of origin were so insignificant that they were not even ants in front of that power. That was the power left behind by the heavenly gods of origin. Let's go. Yun Nuashing spoke softly and pulled Huey's attention back. He nodded and turned to walk into the former's portal. Yun Nuashing turned his head and stopped in his tracks. He looked at the empty void with a faint expression of pain on his face. Something in his head was touching his nerve. However, it quickly disappeared. It only took about 5 seconds for the pain to disappear completely. There was no lingering pain. What the hell? Yun Nuashing held his head and shook it. His eyes were still staring at the empty void. He couldn't help but frown. It didn't seem like he was reacting to the huge crack. It seemed like he suddenly had a headache. He turned his head and walked into the portal, disappearing into the void. A second later, he emerged from the portal again. Not far from him, the black fragment was floating and spinning in the void. It didn't have the protection of the rule domain, but it wasn't broken down by the void. I'm thinking, why does this key look so familiar? Yun Nuashing looked at the fragment suspiciously. He furrowed his brows and searched desperately in his mind. After a while, after going through more than 10 eras of memories, he finally dug out a memory from a corner. He suddenly broke out in a cold sweat. That black thing seemed to have been gathering dust in his pendant for a long time. He didn't even look at it much. He only noticed it when he was fiddling with the pendant. He stared blankly at the key and subconsciously reached out to take it. It was cold to the touch, as if he was holding a piece of ice that wouldn't melt for 10,000 years. It was cold, but he didn't feel the pain that was gradually getting colder. Am I walking on the path of backtracking, or are the incidents an inevitable process that I cannot shake off? Yun Nuashing lowered his head and looked at the fragment in his palm. His gaze was a little dazed. He originally thought that there would be some deviations in this dream because of his later personality, but the final result wouldn't change. What was supposed to happen would still happen. So, was Feng Ling going to come here in the past, or was him getting the fragment key something inevitable? If it was the former, it would be understandable, but if it was the latter, then he felt a little creeped out. It was as if everything he did was fated. No matter if it was him or Feng Ling, they would get this key at this moment. There was a mysterious force that led him here. Bullsh *T. Feng, what are you waiting for? It's time to leave. Huey's voice came from the teleportation door behind him. Yun Nuoshing responded vaguely and put the key into the pendant. Before he completely left, he couldn't help but take a few more glances. His eyelids drooped slightly, and after a moment, he left without looking back. The teleportation door also slowly closed as he entered. The void returned to its calm state. It was still dark, and no one knew what had happened here. When they returned to the Suja continent and saw this continent again, they originally thought that they would see the flames of war soaring into the sky, or the flames of war burning the plains, the ground covered in black smoke, the endless abyss death fog emerging from the void, surrounding this world, and countless manifestations surrounding this continent like an iron can. They thought that they would see such a scene. But in reality, the warriors of Suja were wearing heavy armor, and their bodies were stained with black blood. There were a few columns of black dust rising into the sky from the ground. That was the scene of the abyss death fog's power being released into the void. At this moment, there was a holy aura that they were slightly familiar with floating in the Suja continent. That was the last power left behind by the Supreme Being. Under the guidance of the Scepter's consciousness, it led the warriors of Suja continent to defeat the last enemy. Why do I feel like we're late? We looked at the people below who were cleaning up the battlefield after the battle with a dumbfounded expression. Did he not rush back in a hurry to help? Great, they made it in time to wrap things up. The climax had already ended, and they did not even have the time to see the ending of the grand finale. Yun Nuoshing flicked her long hair and said, "Isn't it pretty good? The children who belong to this world have dealt with the disaster of their own world. It's better than fantasizing about someone coming to save them." "That's true," Hui mumbled as he nodded. "But I still feel that something is not right. You guys, we were so busy releasing that scepter, waking up the Most High, and going out with him to cause a ruckus. Now we're rushing back to save the day, and you're telling me that the matter has been resolved. I keep feeling a little too busy, and then I feel uncomfortable all over. You're not being surrounded like stars, so you feel uncomfortable." Yun Nuoshing joked. "No." Hui rolled his eyes and crossed his arms. "I just feel that." "Hey Hui, look below." Yun Nuoshing lowered her head. The light emitted from the barrier of order from Sua illuminated the entire sky. They stood in the largest battlefield of the continent that had just ended. There were still many warriors below who had not retreated in time. The light from the barrier cast their shadows on the ground. After some time, they were finally noticed by the people who were cleaning up the battlefield below. Then, the warriors of Sua put down what they were doing and gave them a strange salute. Their expressions were solemn and uniform, so it should not be a curse. "Are they worshipping?" Hui scratched his head. He could feel the gratitude from the people below, which made him a little puzzled. They did not do anything. How did they receive such a big salute from countless people for no reason? "That's the Sua people's thank you salute." A chuckle came from beside them. Yun Nuoshing and Hui turned their heads and saw a shadow-like guy holding a scepter in the sky, walking towards them. Naturally, it was the scepter's consciousness. "Salute to you, celestial gods of the divine realm. The Supreme has told me everything." The scepter's consciousness stood a few meters in front of them and said after a slight pause, "Have you returned to normal?" Yun Nuoshing glanced at him and said, "Yes, and no." The scepter's consciousness shook its head. "Only my consciousness is left in this body. It is the last power left by the Supreme. Soon, my power will be exhausted, and I will fall asleep again. Maybe I won't have the chance to wake up again. Maybe I will wake up again when the Suja continent is in danger. But it doesn't matter. The crisis has been resolved. It doesn't matter if this power is left or not. We looked at the people below and could not help but say, "You just said that it was a thank you salute. What does that have to do with us? We haven't had time to do anything." Hearing that, the scepter's consciousness chuckled and shook his head. "First of all, you have awakened me and activated the last power left by the Supreme. Secondly, I have borrowed your power." Us? Yun Nuashing was stunned for a moment. The scepter's consciousness nodded and said, "The power you used to fight in the forest was branded in heaven and earth by the distorted rules there. That is one of the powers of the Supreme. 40% of your power has been engraved and borrowed by us. The power of a peak Empyrean god of origin, even 40% is enough to clean up the little aftereffects left in this world." As he said that, he paused for a moment and said awkwardly, "It is also because of your power that your images have been manifested and remembered by the people of Sua." Huey's cheeks twitched. "This won't have any effect, right?" The scepter's consciousness thought seriously for a moment and said with uncertainty, "Who knows? Maybe they will build a statue for you too or something." Yun Nuashing and Hui were speechless. Yun Nuashing felt awkward for a moment and suddenly looked at the continent of Sua. It is very difficult to completely remove the death shroud of the abyss with this level of cleansing. If it is rooted in your conceptual layer of rules, this level of cleansing will not be enough. Hearing that, the scepter's consciousness's expression became serious. He made a gesture of taking a deep breath and seemed a little nervous. "Then what should I do? My remaining power is not enough for a large-scale cleansing of the rules." Yun Nuashing was silent for a moment. He looked down at the people of Sua who were returning to the right path and cleaning up the battlefield. Some of them even sneakily looked up and gave him a look of worship or awe. He felt a little creeped out and goosebumps appeared all over his body. "The main thing is that I did not do anything. It feels very wrong to be remembered like that. I am afraid that I will wake up awkwardly in the middle of the night with nightmares. It is not that I did nothing, you guys." Yun Nuashing shook his head. "It doesn't matter. Just take it that I did something unnecessary. It is rare for me to find a reason to feel at ease. Don't stop me. Yes. This guy is usually very lazy. It is rare for him to move around. Don't try to persuade him." Hui smiled cheekily and said as he put his arm around Yun Nuashing's shoulder. The scepter's consciousness was silent for a moment and nodded. "Then I thank the two gods first. The people of Sua will always remember your kindness." Yun Nuashing felt even more awkward when he heard that. He only felt uncomfortable all over. Why would the world remember him for no reason? Anyway, this matter was settled. They all thought that it was just a small matter. They never thought that many years later, there would be two faiths on the Sua continent. This was something that no one expected, including the clumsy guardian and the observer. After agreeing to help, Yun Nuashing started. He used the Netherworld Ruins sword to cut open a crack in the sky. The dark crack seemed to lead to the void, and there was some light surging in it. He opened the crack to a size that could allow 2 or 3 people to enter. Then he waved at the two and flew in first. Hui and the scepter's consciousness followed closely behind. "Well, to be honest, I really don't want to come to this place again." Before he started, Yun Nuashing had goosebumps all over his body. It was as if there was a prehistoric beast staring at him in the dark. "What's wrong?" Hui looked at him and asked curiously. "There are many strange things in the conceptual layer of the rules. Its shape can change at will. There is everything here and there is nothing here. It all depends on one's thoughts." Yun Nuashing's cheeks twitched slightly. He couldn't help but think of that day. So, if you see something that is unchanged in the conceptual layer of the rules, it is most likely a ghost that lives in this place. Even if the gods see it, they will stay as far away as possible. Is it that exaggerated? Hui scratched his head. He knew about this layer, but it was his first time here. I used to think that it was exaggerated. Yun Nuashing sighed and said faintly, "Until one day I was chased as far as the void. Only then did I know that it was not an exaggeration, but a statement." He lied. When he saw that thing, he didn't have time to run or dodge. He turned around and pounced on it. That's right, it was the sin of the world. At that time, he followed the conceptual layer of the rules of the realm of the gods all the way to the conceptual layer of the void. The distribution of the conceptual layers of the rules was just like the world light clusters in the void and the void. The world light clusters were independent of each other, but they were all connected to the void. Therefore, he could follow the conceptual layer to the conceptual layer of the void, and what he saw there was the rules of the entire 8 elements realm. Then, he bumped into that thing, the thing that had haunted him for his entire life. He could no longer escape and became its prison forever. His body and soul were a cage, imprisoning the most dangerous and terrifying thing in the entire Deyuan realm. It was the sin of the world in the entire Deyuan realm. It was so heavy that even the primeval god could not breathe. Once bitten, twice shy. What he was afraid of was the place in this world that left him with lingering fear. It was the concept level of the laws. Even though he already knew that the universal sin of the great primordial realm was on him, he was still worried that he would see something in this place. It had already become a nightmare that he could not get rid of. Chapter 1196. The action of the rule cleansing was much smaller than what the scepter's consciousness had imagined. It thought that it would make a big movement in this dim conceptual layer of the rules. In fact, Yun Nuashing just waved her hand lightly, and a circle of colorful energy slowly spread to the distance, and finally integrated into this space, and then there was no more movement. If one's line of sight followed the energy ring, they would be able to see that it was rushing towards a faraway place in one direction. Along the way, when it passed by some places, it was like a gentle breeze brushing past the ground, raising dust. However, what was raised by the colorful energy ring were wisps of black smoke, sticking to the corners of this space and ready to move. It was completely impossible to distinguish with the naked eye unless they could be pulled out from the depths of space, just like what Yun Nua used. Watching the energy ring go to the depths of this layer, Yun Nuashing clapped her hands and said, "It's done." "That's it?" The scepter's consciousness was dumbfounded. To be honest, it did not understand anything. "Yes." Yun Nuashing nodded. Seeing the scepter's dumbfounded look, she pondered for a moment and said, "If you are still not assured. I know, this world has been infected by the abyssal death mist for too long. If it were me, I would not easily believe that the dark forces that have occupied this world for countless years have been cleansed so easily." No, the scepter's consciousness shook its head stiffly. Before it could say a word, Yun Nuashing said, "I'll leave one more thing, but it's just a backup plan. At most, it will have the effect of warning and blocking. If they really come back one day, just like this time and the past, you will have to fight against them by yourselves. It's impossible for someone to come and save you every time." The scepter's consciousness nodded. It naturally understood the reason behind it. We are in the conceptual layer of the rules. We looked at the depths of this space. At the limit of his vision, he could no longer see the energy ring. He waved his hand at Yun Nuashing and said, "Won't it affect the Sua continent if we do anything here?" "It won't affect anything." Yun Nuashing shook her head. The concept stratum of precepts is the stratum of precepts in layman terms, the bottom of the sea of precepts. Any major movement here would certainly cause some changes to the deeper environment of this world, but it would be very weak and negligible. Sua's highest tier is merely a heavenly god-tier lifeform, and apart from it, no one else would be able to sense anything. Furthermore, I did not do anything major, merely using a bit of energy to sweep across the concept stratum and uproot the deep-rooted abyssal death shroud. I did not deliberately change or disturb anything. No, if I must say, there will be some weak changes. Very weak, but still, it will not affect anything. Perhaps on a sunny day, someone will accidentally see the space vibrate, and it will pass by like an illusion. That's the extent of the turbulence, and it will only be this week for 3 days. Both the scepter's consciousness and Hui nodded. If it was only this level, it could indeed be ignored. After that, Yun Nuoxing and Hui were not in a hurry to leave. They stayed on the Suya continent for some time. The two of them negotiated with the scepter's consciousness for a period of time and threw the Suya continent into a newly stabilized world of light in the depths of the void. The barrier was then put away by the latter. The past few days were calm. There was no abyss fog, no war. The people of Suyao were still cleaning up the huge battlefield. When they saw Yun Nuoxing and Hui walking by at a low altitude, they would stop and give gifts of worship. It made the two of them uncomfortable, and then they turned to wander in the clouds. Although with the unintentional help of the two of them, the battle that had lasted for countless years ended in victory in a short period of time. However, the world had been devastated for countless years. As the source of the last battle, the Land of Hope had suffered the most damage. In addition to the traces of destruction left by the two of them, there was a large area of land that was destroyed by more energy. Those were the traces left by the warriors of Suya. 80 to 90% of the land had been hollowed out. The forest that once existed in the surrounding area had disappeared. The closer to the center, the more serious the damage was. Looking down from the sky, the original place of the Land of Hope looked like a big hole that had been hollowed out. The cracks in the earth spread out in all directions with that place as the center. The nearest city was on the path of the cracks, and there was still some distance before it would be affected. The people in that city had already begun to move, and perhaps they would retreat far away. Other places had been suffering from countless small-scale disturbances. They were not as tragic as the Land of Hope, so the situation in those places was better. In general, except for the place where the Land of Hope was originally located, which looked like it had been bombarded by a meteorite, the other places could be said to be safe. There were only a few traces of battle. After the traces left by the abyssal death mist were completely cleaned up, the energy of the world had also returned to the right track. The normal energy cycle, the energy wandering between heaven and earth, was also normal. At least, Yun Nuoxing did not feel the aura that made him feel abnormal. Except for the Land of Hope, there was a lot of rotten and disgusting smell there. The burned corpses of the Suya warriors, the distortion left behind after the abyssal death mist dissipated. There was no way to save these. In the depths of the Suya continent, the deepest underground, close to the core of the planet, Yun Nuoxing and Hui floated in this place where the magma was boiling. The dazzling red magma in front of them gave them an illusion. The two of them were not afraid of the temperature here, and did not take any precautions. They came here to fulfill a sentence. The scepter's consciousness had exhausted its energy and fell into a deep sleep in the past few days. The two of them followed its wish and buried it in the depths of the Land of Hope, letting it guard the ruins that existed in name only. Yun Nuoxing's hands were slightly closed, and there was a translucent blue energy ball the size of a foot between his hands. It was like a huge liquid ball that contained the sun. The surface was constantly rolling and twisting, like the magnificent sea at night. And in a circle around the surface, there were countless energy particles that were emitting fluorescent light, like a group of elves dancing around the sun. Yun Nuoxing stood in the sea of magma with his eyes closed, and there was a faint murmur coming out of his mouth. Every time his voice came out, there were small talismans that were only the size of a little finger being born around the energy ball. A few talismans gathered into a ball and drilled into the energy ball, making the light suddenly brighten for a moment, and the size of the energy ball faintly expanded a little. It's done. Half an hour later, when the translucent energy ball was half a foot in size, Yun Nuoxing snapped his fingers and showed a relieved smile. At the same time, the snapping of his fingers made the entire sea of magma tremble. Hui quickly calmed the sea of magma and rolled his eyes at this guy who didn't know how to control his strength. He turned to look at the energy ball. At this moment it had become abnormally quiet. Its surface was round, like a calm sun, and there were 3 rings of light that were emitting a faint light that was fixed there at an acute angle. He couldn't help but praise this magical thing. That's it? Although I don't understand it, it looks very powerful. That's right. Yun Nuoshing smiled. The fake world core carries the information of 1,000 world light clusters and our energy in it. It's also made by me, so the quality is guaranteed. As long as it doesn't meet people of our level who touch it, there won't be any accident. You can use this to monitor the entire Suja continent in case of the abyssal death mist? It's just a simple 2-step array creation, Yi Zichen said. Yun Nuoshing nodded. Monitor the energy flow of the Suja continent and monitor for any abnormalities. If the abyssal death mist descends, it will set up a barrier immediately. And this time, the barrier has been added with our energy, so it will be completely sealed. The Suja continent will be completely isolated from the outside until it detects that there is no longer any abyssal death mist inside or outside. Hui was a little surprised. He took a few more glances at the fake world core and found that he still couldn't understand it. He couldn't help but shake his head. Well, I don't understand, but it feels very powerful. If all the surging energy is turned into an attack, it will probably be able to blow through this newly formed and stabilized world light cluster. It's not an explosive. Forget it. Yun Nuoshing didn't know whether to laugh or cry. He shook his head and didn't say anything more to Hui. He was too lazy to listen anyway. He held the translucent blue energy ball in his hands and slowly squatted down. He gently touched it to a solid surface in front of him. The energy ball had no physical body, so it easily passed through the solid surface and then surged into the real core and disappeared. After doing this, Yun Nuoshing stood up and stretched. He waved his hand and opened a teleportation gate. He waved his hand at Hui and the 2 of them left the depths of the earth together. The sunlight that came from the front made the 2 of them feel a lot more comfortable. The place that was only red really made them dizzy. Is this all? Hui asked softly. He turned back to look at the somewhat tattered world. The war that has lasted for millions of years has just ended. There are actually many places that are distorted in this world. Faults, all kinds of faults, life, and many more. I don't know when it will recover. Repairing it will always be much harder than rebuilding it. Seeing his overflowing sympathy, Yun Nuoshing shook his head helplessly. He stretched out his hand and patted him on the back, saying, This is all. You have to give them some time to recover. This is their world. It's what they have to experience, not our world. It's not our place to intervene too much. Yun Nuoshing paused for a moment and looked into the distant void. We still have things we have to do. There are many things that we have to do. It's useless to be overflowing with sympathy. If we don't solve that big problem, the 8 elements realm won't be stable. Hui nodded silently. Of course, he knew that he had seen many things on this trip. Speaking of this trip, he said, in the end, we still haven't found any effective way to fight against the Abyss Death Fog. There were 2 reasons why the power of Suyao was very effective against the Abyss Death Fog. First, the Abyss Death Fog here was actually weaker, much weaker. Second, the people of Suyao were very used to this kind of power. Their existence was like antibodies. Naturally, it was not difficult for them to deal with their old opponent. It was actually understandable that they could hold on for such a long time. There's no good way to find it. Yun Nuoshing put his hands in his pockets and stood side by side with him. The 2 figures slowly floated up to the sky. The most effective way is to crush everything with absolute power. There's nothing else to say. When the power is strong enough to control everything in the palm of your hand, all the initiative is in the palm of your hand, then you don't have to worry about anything. Hui looked at him helplessly. It's the same the other way around. It's crushing, but it's just that we are being crushed by them. Yun Nuashing. Damn it, there are still two primeval heavenly gods in the underworld. This kind of combat power is really unfair. However, the word fair is just nonsense. Headache, how do we deal with those two guys? No matter how hard we try, we can't deal with them. After he saw the power left behind by the first great heavenly god and the others, he understood even more clearly that compared to them, one was heaven and the other was earth. There was no such thing as fighting across an entire level. Let's slowly have a headache over these things. They won't be able to figure it out in a short period of time, unless the two of them can break through to the primeval heavenly god realm in this period of time. Even if we think about it, we know that it's impossible. There's still a long time before the seal ends. Moreover, they haven't figured out how to break through to the primeval heavenly god realm. The two of them slowly left the Suya continent. Yun Nuashing opened the portal and let Hui go in first. He turned around and looked at the continent behind him. He frowned as he recalled what the scepter's consciousness had told them. Gods of the divine world, you have to be careful. There's a force shrouding this war. This war that engulfs the entire 8 elements realm will become uncontrollable under the influence of this force. That's what the Most High saw, but we don't know what that force is. He only asked me to remind the gods of the divine world. That force? Yun Nuashing frowned and pondered for a while. Then, he shook his head and left. After leaving the Suya continent, Yun Nuashing brought Hui back to the world of light where he first saw the Suya continent. The people he brought from the divine world were still wandering around the many worlds of this world of light. Before returning to the divine world, he had to find them. Other than that, there was, Feng, what are you doing in this damned place? Hui looked at the abyssal black hole that occupied his entire line of sight and hid the entire starry sky behind it. Looking at the black hole that was as black as the void, Hui felt his scalp tingle. I came to take a look and see if there's any reaction after the Suya continent disappears. Yun Nuashing said. The Suya continent had been floating not far away from this abyssal black hole since the beginning. It had been maintaining the trend of falling towards it, but it had not fallen into it for a long time. He estimated that any matter, maybe energy and matter other than those planets and the sun could fall into the abyssal black hole. Everything else would be forcefully sent back after touching that layer of barrier. At this moment, the two of them were standing in front of this layer of barrier. When they stretched out their hands to touch it, they felt a rebounding force from their hand. They could not feel the aura of the abyssal death mist. This was what made Yun Nuashing and the others the most surprised. A black hole that was emitting the aura of the abyssal death mist from the inside out actually did not have the aura of the abyssal death mist on its barrier. Could it be that other creatures of order had put it on? Thinking about the situation in this world of light carefully, it seemed to be possible. Maybe someone had put a barrier here to prevent too much energy from falling into this abyssal black hole. It was simply bullying the abyssal black hole that could not move. Do you want to go in and take a look? We turned his head to look at him and joked. I do have such an idea. Let's take a look at the core that controls this void that is constantly producing the abyssal death mist. Maybe we can study. Yun Nuashing suddenly stopped talking. He was about to force his way through the barrier. He turned around abruptly and looked into the distance behind him. His gaze pierced through the void and the endless void. He saw the middle plane very far away, but he could not see anything. The abyssal death mist blocked his vision. An indescribable and needless feeling of palpitation suddenly surged into their hearts. Yun Nuashing and Hui's expressions suddenly changed. This power, this destructive power. They could not see it, but they could feel it. Even the heavenly god of origin could feel this surge of energy across the void. It was as if the entire void was boiling. There was an unprecedentedly powerful force disturbing the void. Even the conceptual layer of the rules was trembling. Something was releasing a power that was beyond their understanding. was that the power of the heavenly God of origin. The underworld has made a move, but we don't know where they are targeting. The heavenly God of origin's attack directly kicked off the curtain. They didn't even have time to prepare. We took a deep breath. We can't delay any longer. When we return, we have to get the God realm to take action. If we delay any longer, we won't even be able to gather the power to resist. Yes. Yun Nuashing nodded. This time, he did not object. As he said, this was something that no one in the 8 elements realm could escape from. No matter who it was, they would have to face it head-on. The two of them were no exception. It was just a matter of the order of appearance. After dragging on for so long, it was time for the God realm to come to the forefront. The heavenly gods of origin in this world of light also felt the same situation. They all involuntarily stopped and looked around in confusion. They felt it, but could not find the specific direction of the abnormality. For a moment, they all hurriedly called out to the guardians in their souls. "Don't be nervous. The people of the underworld have just made a move," Hui replied calmly. That's even better. If we can alert all the original life forms in the void, perhaps we won't be completely powerless. I believe that all the original life forms have sensed the energy riot. It's time. You go back first. Go to the Saint Spirit field and the Changyuan field. Invite their representatives to discuss the matter of survival. The people of the God realm and the ancient imperial world hurriedly responded. They quickly tore open the void and rushed in the direction of the God realm. Feng! Hui breathed a sigh of relief. He turned around and called out, only to see Yun Nuashing staring at the huge abyss in a daze. Hui followed his gaze, but did not see anything. It was as dark as the void. After a few seconds, Yun Nuashing replied, "I heard you. Just say it. Can we win?" There was another long silence. The light in Yun Nuashing's eyes flickered. After a minute, he said softly, "Bet everything. Everything in the Great Yuan realm. The probability is 1 in 170 million. Is this your answer? Or is it the observer's answer?" "This is the observer's answer." Yun Nuashing's eyelids drooped slightly. "There is no waiting for a miracle. If you want a miracle, there is no other answer except to create it yourself. In that split second, I saw a corner of the future. Maybe it won't be so bad." He was bluffing again. He didn't look at anything. The future that he knew and his memories were the future at this moment. His past memories were the future at this moment, showing him a future without people from the underworld. However, he still lost the battle in the future. He really gambled everything. He fought until the great elemental realm was exhausted. He exhausted all his energy, but he still couldn't protect anything. In the end, everything was still emptiness. Only the God realm survived. Those who had passed away might have passed away forever. Chapter 1197. Hui had stayed in this space for a very long time. He couldn't remember how many times he had stood up from his crouch. He looked at Yun Nua, who was staring at the black hole, and couldn't help but scratch his head. "Feng, you can go in directly, or we can go back. We've already stayed here for 3 days. The people from the Saint Spirit realm and the Changyuan realm are waiting for us in the God realm." Yun Nuashing moved slightly, as if a stone sculpture that had been frozen for tens of thousands of years was slowly moving. He had been in this position for the past 3 days without moving at all, which made Hui think that he had been petrified. At this moment, he slowly turned his head and looked at him, his eyelids drooping slightly. "The situation in the black hole of the abyss is too complicated, I can't rashly go in. But I want to take a look. There must be a secret about the underworld inside. If I can solve the secret there, it might increase that small probability." Hui floated over in boredom. He reached out and grabbed Yun Nuashing's long hair that reached her ankles. He swayed it back and forth in the starry sky. "You've been studying here for 3 days. If it were up to me, you should just barge in and take a look." You won't be able to find anything even if you stand here for a year. It's very strange inside. I'll leave it to you when we go to the God realm. Yun Nuoxing glanced at him and said, Are you sure you can handle the affairs of the God realm by yourself? Also, it's not like I can't go in and take a look at the affairs of this world. At most, we'll meet again in 10,000 years. Hui smiled bitterly and waved his hand. Forget it, forget it. Don't do this, don't mess around. Yun Nuoxing nodded and turned back to look at the black hole. Hui couldn't help but sit down beside Yun Nuoxing and stare at the black hole. It really did look like the void. It was pure darkness and there was nothing inside. Starlight constantly fell into it and disappeared. Energy also flowed into it as if it was returning to the void, dissolving and disappearing. Really, he couldn't see anything. It was pitch black. After staring at it for so long, he had the illusion that he was in the void, surrounded by infinite darkness and the void. If you're bored, you can go back first. Yun Nuoxing couldn't help but sigh when she saw Hui's expression. There's no need to sit here with me. Yeah, the three realms gathering, how can we, the observers of the God realm, not be present? We wandered back and forth in boredom. He couldn't help but mutter, if it weren't for the netherworld, I wouldn't have called those people over. The Saint Spirit realm and the Changyuan realm don't have much interaction with the God realm, so it's not easy to talk to them. If it weren't for the fact that it's a matter of life and death, I wouldn't have bothered with them. That doesn't sound like something the Guardian of Sunshine would say, Yun Nuoxing teased. Hui waved his hand in annoyance. Sunshine. Do you really think I don't know what those people are saying? I just didn't pay attention to it. Sunshine has its limits. There are so many things to worry about now. Where would the sunshine come from? Only those who can see hope and touch hope will be sunshine and positive. If a dead end is placed in front of you, in front of the entire void, and you have to bite the bullet and go into battle personally, if it were you, would you be able to smile? I didn't smile much in the first place. Hui. That's what I mean. Well, there are so many things to worry about now that I'm a little anxious. Yun Nuoxing nodded. Yes. Many things. Many things are destined to happen. That's not that pessimistic. Hui sat up like a carp. There's still hope, but it's very small, just a little bit of hope. At least there's still hope. The expression on your face doesn't look good. Yun Nuoxing looked at Hui's wrinkled handsome face and shook her head helplessly. She turned her gaze back to the black hole in the abyss and spaced out. Hui was also a god with a human heart. The things he thought about might not be as much as Yun Nuoxing, but his thoughts were more complicated than Yun Nuoxing's. This was because the human heart would think a lot, care a lot, take care of a lot, and take care of a lot of things. Naturally, they would be distressed if they took on too many things, let alone something that couldn't even see a tiny bit of hope. Gambling the entire void, Was there any difference between doing it and gathering the strength of the entire God realm, now, dozens of eras later? No. It's just that this time, Hui was the one who had to worry about these things. He was the one in the light of the God realm, and Yun Nuoxing was just lurking in the shadows, an executive. In fact, he was too lazy to make decisions most of the time. Otherwise, he would be the one with the most authority in the God realm. He was just lazy, so he left this matter to Hui. One stood in the light and the other lurked in the shadows. It was actually quite good. Hui rolled around beside Yun Nuoxing, mumbling sounds coming from his mouth. After listening for a long time, Yun Nuoxing felt a little uncomfortable. He turned his head to take a look and saw him rolling around like a ball. He couldn't help but sigh. Why don't you go back first? I'll watch for a while more. If there's really no other way, I'll go back. Hui stopped, looked up and gritted his teeth. The last time you said this, I waited for 3,000 years. Yun Nuoxing. Hui rolled his eyes in annoyance. Gods were people who didn't have a sense of time, and the two heavenly gods of origin were even worse. He was actually fine, But Yun Nuoshing was completely unreliable. If he wanted to rely on time, he might as well do it himself. This was why he was making a fuss here. He was worried that this fellow would sit here for hundreds of millions of years. He was completely capable of doing such a thing. For example, that time, and that time, he had asked him to go to the lower primordial realm to play, and in the end, he had suddenly sensed something in the other primordial realms, and then he had sat there for a long time, thinking about the primordial realm and the void. In short, if no one was watching him, he would never stop. He lived in his own timeline and didn't care about the outside world at all. If he didn't stay here to attract his attention, he would really sit there until the end of time. Yun Nuoshing listened to his constant babbling and felt a headache coming on. His eyes were fixed on the black hole of the abyss, but he couldn't concentrate at all. His mind was filled with the image of that guy rolling around and acting cute. When he thought about it, he couldn't help but roll his eyes. Roll his eyes. He felt like he couldn't think anymore. Hui rolled one round and came to Yun Nuoshing's side. He knocked his head against Yun Nuoshing's back and said in a half-dead tone, "When are you going back? When are you going back? The people over there have already arrived. They are all urging me desperately. Let's go back quickly." Yun Nuoshing turned around and pressed down on his head. Wait a little longer. Really, just a little longer. If you keep rubbing against me, I'll throw you to. There was another inexplicable restlessness that came from his heart. An indescribable feeling of fear arose spontaneously and completely took away his attention. Not only him, Hui, who was still babbling, suddenly stopped. Both of them felt cold all over at this moment. They looked in the same direction together. 3 days ago, they also looked in the same direction. Today, it was the same direction again. This time, the feeling was even more unsettling. It was an endless feeling, as if they had been immersed in the depths of the void alone for tens of thousands of eras. Their 5 senses had been taken away, their soul and spirit had been sealed, and they had completely lost their sense of the outside world. That feeling was still gradually devouring their senses until they couldn't even feel their own bodies anymore. The momentary illusion came back to their senses in an instant. Yun Nuoshing and Hui looked at each other with a dignified expression. Both of them stood up at the same time. Is it the same direction 3 days ago? It's exactly the same. Yun Nuoshing's frown deepened. That kind of power, that was the power of the heavenly god of the beginning. He actually moved his hand in the same place twice. No, this feeling was not like the feeling of moving. He had felt it many times. This was more like the feeling of doing something unconsciously after waking up. The heavenly god of the beginning seemed to still be in a half-awake state. In the past 3 days, he had unconsciously twitched twice, and this time it was a sign that he was really going to wake up. Yun Nuoshing sighed and looked at the black hole behind him with some reluctance. It seemed that there was really no time for him to sit here and think about anything. What a pity, he was clearly just a little bit away from seeing something. Let's go back," he said softly and waved his hand to start building the portal. Hui came back to his senses and couldn't help but be shocked when he saw his actions. "You don't care about the thing behind us? There's no time." Yun Nuoshing raised his head and looked at him. "Didn't you say that those people have already arrived? The host can be a little late, but he can't be late. Besides, we really don't have much time." Hui quickly adjusted his state of mind. The lazy state of a salted fish just now completely disappeared. His messy white robe became neat again with a flash of light. He even reached out to grab his long hair and waved his hand fiercely. "That's right, it's time to receive the guests." "Where?" Yun Nuoshing did not even raise his head. The magic circle in his hand became strange and unpredictable. A huge, unimaginable power of space crazily gathered. Hui grinned and said in a matter-of-fact tone, "Of course it's the Guardian Temple." With a flash of light, The two of them disappeared from this damned place at the same time, leaving only a faint distortion phenomenon left by the vibration of space. Gradually, a strange dong-dong sound came from the abyss black hole. It sounded like the sound of a drum, but also like something's heartbeat. The Guardian Temple was located in the far west of the realm of the god. It was the westernmost part of the border between the Taiyuan domain and the Zenith domain. It was also the most sacred place in the entire realm of the god. Huey's name was known by everyone in the world. If it weren't for the fact that the realm of the gods was such a special place, he might have been worshipped as a god and perhaps even given birth to a religion. Unfortunately, this was the realm of the god. There were 100 billion reasons why such a thing could not be born. If it were any other place, it might really give birth to a religion. The Guardian Temple did not have any accompanying buildings. It was either a palace complex or a palace-like big house. This was Yun Nuoxing's original words. Although it was also divided into many areas, it was also like a big room. Its structure and style were also full of the flavor of the realm of the god. In fact, it was not different from other temples. The corners of the temple were decorated with a lot of Xian crystals. Other than that, there was nothing else. Why was it so troublesome to find a person? Although it was not difficult to talk with the soul seed, we would often be beside Yun Nuoxing when he was not in the shrine. Their small talk could not be heard by others. If the soul seed was accidentally touched, it would easily leak their words to others. Therefore, he simply blocked the soul seed every time he came out so that others could not hear their conversation. If they wanted to find him, they could only go to the shrine to inform his soul power. Although it was not difficult to talk with the soul seed, we would often be beside Yun Nuoxing when he was not in the shrine. Their small talk could not be heard by others. If the soul seed was accidentally touched, it would easily leak their words to others. Therefore, he simply blocked the soul seed every time he came out so that others could not hear their conversation. If they wanted to find him, they could only go to the shrine to inform his soul power. At this moment, the main hall of the temple was filled with people. If one looked carefully, one could see that there were 40 to 50 people. They were all big shots in the celestial realm, and among them were the Empyrean gods. Some of them could not make it, but they used projection crystals to project a trace of their soul power into the hall. Many people looked nervous. 3 days ago, the Protector's warning had caused alarm lights to light up in countless people's minds. Later, when they heard that they were going to discuss something important together, they were so nervous that they were sweating. The only two people who were not nervous were the people from the Saint Spirit realm and the Changyuan realm. They had to cross dozens of worlds and travel a short distance in the void to reach the celestial realm, so there were not many of them. Only 7 people had made it here. When the people from the 2 realms arrived, they were actually a little nervous. After all, the celestial realm was the #1 major realm, while the Saint Spirit realm and the Changyuan realm were ranked 2nd and 3rd. They rarely interacted with the #1 major realm, so they subconsciously thought that the people here were all powerful. Just like the emissaries who came to inform them 3 days ago, their realms were frighteningly high. Now that they observed the people in the hall, although they were all Empyrean gods, there was still a considerable gap between their realms. This allowed them to estimate the combat power of the celestial realm, which made them feel much more relaxed. They felt that the emissaries were only a minority, and that the 3 realms should be about the same in terms of combat power. This slightly smug thought lasted until a teleportation gate suddenly opened in the middle of the hall, and 2 figures emerged from it. When Yun Nuoxing and Hui arrived, the people from the celestial realm instantly fell silent. Some of the projection crystals placed in the corners lit up one after another, and blurry figures appeared in the hall one after another. Among them were the Empyrean gods who had followed the 2 into the depths of the void, and naturally, there were also people from the ancient theocrat. When everyone had arrived, the spacious hall was suddenly filled with nearly 100 people. The people from the Saint Spirit realm and the Changyuan realm also fell silent. Those who were able to come here were the strongest of their realms, but at this moment, they still felt as if they were in an abyss. They were intimidated by the solemn atmosphere in the hall, and were also shocked by the two people who had appeared. We went to confirm some details, but I don't think I need to go into detail. You probably sensed the energy waves just now, right? We pulled out a chair at the head of the table and slowly said as he sat down. Energy waves? What kind of energy waves? The people from the Saint Spirit realm asked cautiously, their expressions somewhat puzzled. Yun Nuoshing had just sat down when she heard these words, and she couldn't help but frown. Hui was also stunned. Just as he was about to speak, the first person to his left said cautiously, Lord Guardian, what kind of waves are you talking about? The celestial realm hasn't sensed any special energy waves in the past month. The people from the Changyuan realm also agreed. The void of the upper planes. It's been quite peaceful recently. Even the Origin Realm's battles have been very rare, so I didn't sense anything special. This time, Hui was also surprised. He exchanged a glance with Yun Nuoshing and whispered, it seems that there's still a problem. The Celestial Realm and the other two realms didn't sense anything. This is a little interesting. Yun Nuoshing nodded, then narrowed her eyes slightly, clearly not intending to speak. Hui smiled bitterly, tapped the table with his finger, and coughed softly. Then let me say it. A few days ago, we went to the lower planes and confirmed that the entire lower planes of the Eight Elements realm had been destroyed. There were only endless sounds of worlds being destroyed, and there was no longer any order. The lower planes. So fast! The last time I went there, the lower planes was still quite peaceful. I didn't expect. There was a slight commotion in the hall. This news was no different from a heavy bomb to everyone. The people sitting in this hall could be considered the strongest group of people in the Eight Elements realm. It was normal for them to travel around the Eight Elements realm, and they definitely went to the lower planes many times. However, the last time they went there, they saw that the lower planes were flourishing, which meant that there were countless worlds. But in the blink of an eye, the lower planes were completely destroyed. They knew what was happening in the void. They knew that it was a disaster, but they didn't know anything more. There was an extreme lack of information, so they didn't know the danger of this matter. They didn't know that the entire Eight Elements realm was at risk of being destroyed, and that it was imminent. Huey's finger drew back and forth on the table in the hall and said, there's a lot of information that we just confirmed. In the past, we didn't pay much attention to this disaster. Of course, I believe that all of you here didn't pay much attention to it either. Most of you stayed away from it. Everyone in the hall scratched their cheeks awkwardly and looked away. Just this point alone made Yun Nuoshing completely certain that these guys were also. Oh, he didn't have the right to criticize others. After all, he was floating on the clouds all day long, either sleeping or sleeping. Yun Nuoshing swallowed and slowly sat up straight and said, the middle planes have been attacked and the borders are falling. The most powerful world in the middle planes has almost completely fallen. I'll be frank, this war. Yes, it's a war. Put away your doubtful eyes. It's not a disaster. It's not a disaster from the beginning to the end. It's a vast war, an expedition that belongs to the enemy. This war will continue until the Eight Elements realm, the Seven Elements realm, and even the entire Greater Elements realm are reduced to ashes. Seeing that it was rare for him to speak, we thought for a moment and shrank back, looking at the people in the hall. Who is our enemy? One of the heavenly gods of origin from the realm of the gods couldn't help but ask. Yun Nuoshing and Hui looked at each other, and the former said softly, the netherworld, the companion realm of the gods. Our good neighbor. The entire hall was silent, dead silent. The people of the Saint Spirit realm and the Changyuan realm all maintained a comical expression of shock, and they didn't even dare to breathe. There's no time for you to confirm your doubts. This is the most realistic thing that the two of us have confirmed. Hui slowly sat up straight and said, "The only way is to fight. Victory or death. The enemy is equally powerful, and they have the power to rival the entire 8 elements realm, or even surpass it. Our chances of victory are quite good, and we have to seize every opportunity. The middle planes are in a state of emergency. I think smart people know what to do, right? Do we pretend to be ignorant and wait for them to come and die, or do we gather everyone's strength and give them a hard time? I have a question." A golden-haired young man slowly stood up. He was from the realm of the gods, and he first cupped his hands toward Yun Nuoxing and Hui before saying, "This disaster war, that thing is called the Abyss Death Mist, right? We know nothing about it, and it will be very difficult to fight it. We'll talk about this in detail later. It's not a big deal, but I want you to make a statement first because..." Hui was still talking, but Yun Nuoxing wasn't listening carefully. He looked at the golden-haired young man, and he couldn't help but frown. He felt a strange feeling from him, and it was this feeling that made him suddenly look at that guy, and he couldn't help but frown. There was a strange feeling. It was from his position as an observer. In the past, those who came into contact with taboos or encountered something, and those who were on his execution list, would also have this strange feeling. It was the feeling of walking toward taboos, toward the abyss. After watching for a while, he shrank back and leaned against the back of his chair without saying anything. Right now, everyone's attention was on Hui, and he was paying attention to that golden-haired young man. The corner of his mouth pulled up in a strange arc, but he soon stopped. Well, he wasn't someone who could just randomly execute people. Let's wait and see. Chapter 1198. The realm of the gods was the most prosperous and the most powerful world in the 8 elements realm. It was given the name realm by countless people, but these were all very ancient things that everyone knew. Not long after the creation of the world and the birth of the great origin realm, the realm of the gods was created by the origin great deity. Although the Saint Spirit realm and the Changyuan realm were also given the name realm, and were also created by the same person, they were still much inferior to the realm of the gods. Perhaps it was also because the origin great deity was the origin of the origin great deity, but this world had some mutations. The life that was born in this world was exceptionally powerful. Another thing was that the consciousness of the world was vague, but in fact, the realm of the gods did not give birth to any world consciousness. Looking at the great origin realm, there were many worlds that had or were allowed to have world consciousness, but the 8 elements realm was an exception. This primordial realm's unique and powerful rules and many conditions of order limited the source worlds here. They could only be dead objects, and could not have their own consciousness. Occasionally there might be exceptions, but looking at the 8 elements realm, there were only a few pitifully few examples. The reason why the realm of the gods had an existence similar to the world consciousness was only because of the 2 priesthoods, the choice of the realm of the gods itself. That's right, the guardian and observer of the realm of the gods were both chosen by the realm of the gods itself. It was not something that anyone wanted, and it was not even allowed to give up. It stubbornly chose someone and felt that he would definitely be able to take care of the position well. Then, it left the matter unsettled. If one did not completely die, the 2 priesthoods of the realm of the gods would not change. For example, Yun Nuoxing, who had the title of repairman of the realm of the gods for countless years, reincarnated again and again, but in the end, she was still the observer of the realm of the gods. It was also because they were unable to change this somewhat rigid choice that people began to question whether or not the realm of the gods even had a world consciousness. The realm of the gods was far too willful, far too unyielding. It had randomly found a person to take up this job, and it was a job for life. If the realm of the gods truly had a consciousness, it would have handled this matter far more tactfully. Speaking of the 2 priesthoods, What kind of power did they bestow upon their bearers? It sounded very tempting and intimidating. The realm of the gods was the first major world in the 8 elemental realms, and the 2 sacred positions in this world. It sounded very tempting, and there must be a lot of power that could not be revealed to others. But in fact, there was no such thing. Of course, the answer was not known to others. The only ones who really knew the answer were Yun Nuoxing and Hui. There was nothing too special about being the so-called guardian and observer. They would not be allowed to learn any lost knowledge, such as Xian arts or divine tactics, nor would they be given any special privileges. Oh, there seemed to be some special privileges. For example, the abnormalities that Yun Nuoxing sensed were told by the observer's eye. It was a special privilege, and the only one. Basically, nothing in the realm of the gods could escape his eyes. It was just a matter of whether he wanted to see it or not. Anyway, now that the golden-haired young man had attracted his attention, he had seen the chaotic and strange aura on him many times. Almost all people with this aura would appear on his execution list. There were only a few who just barely touched the edge of the list. Those who were not killed by him were the kind of people who had one foot in the forbidden area and hurriedly retreated. Therefore, he did not kill them. After confirming that they would not play any tricks, there was no need to kill them. He still had to observe the young man in front of him. Hui slowly stood up. This battle doesn't belong to anyone, it belongs to everyone. This is a matter of the survival of the void. To put it bluntly, this is a matter of our own lives. If we don't fight, we'll just wait to be crushed. The abyssal death shroud has formed an encirclement that has sealed off the entire edge of the void. Layer by layer, it's like boiling a frog in warm water. As we wait, our strength will only decrease little by little. No one objected, and no one was foolish enough to say that they should run away at this critical moment. If they really wanted to run away, they could definitely run away. They were beings of the origin level, and they could still escape from the abyssal death fog at this moment. They could take as many people as they could with them. But what was the point? If they ran away and came back after everything was over, they would look at the ruins and sigh. Ah, at least we survived. No one with half a brain would say something like that. The outside world, the middle plane, and the lower plane were all fighting. They, who were sitting in the center of the void in the 8 elemental realms, had the idea of running away before the battle even started. They should have killed themselves the moment they thought of it. An Empyrean god of origin suddenly looked up and bowed respectfully to Hui. Lord Hui, we have confirmed 3 minutes ago that a powerful energy has shielded the entire upper plane and divided the void into 2 parts. This may be the reason why the Empyrean god of origin and other upper planes did not sense the energy fluctuation. The one who spoke was the Empyrean god of origin who was stationed at the edge of the upper plane. When the abyssal death fog came and was still spreading in the lower plane, he had volunteered to move his world to the edge of the upper plane. As for why he did not go directly to the lower plane, it was because the energy level would drop significantly after crossing planes. Neither he nor the people in his world could bear it, so he could only station himself at the edge of the upper plane. However, he also often observed the border between the middle plane and the lower plane. He was the one who first proposed to Hui to go to the depths of the void. The 7th warning energy barrier we set up has been confirmed to have been triggered. The abyssal death fog is advancing faster. At the same time, we have also confirmed that their energy level is slowly increasing. It seems to be increasing as they go deeper into the middle plane. The 7th level. What's the status of the 7th level? The others were not clear about the situation of the 1st, 2nd, and 3rd levels, so they could only ask directly. The 7th barrier is in the middle plane. It is slightly away from the border between the middle plane and the lower plane. We can confirm that the abyssal death fog is still maintaining that speed, and is even accelerating. My people have made contact with them and sent some forces to reinforce the middle plane. However, the effect was not great. They are now retreating in batches towards the 6th and 5th levels. They have saved all the worlds they could on the way, so there is no loss. Well, it's fine as long as there are no losses. The most worrying thing now is to lose too much before the war starts. We breathed a sigh of relief. He knew the Empyrean god of origin. But then again, it's not a good idea to keep wasting energy like this. Try to gather as much energy as possible. Give them those void territories if they want them. When we retreat, it's best to burn the void into nothingness and not leave them any energy. They can't take it anyway. By the way, is there any feedback from the divine barrier? No. Yun Nuashing paused for a moment and glanced at Hui. Divine barrier? When did you make such a thing? What's it for? It's been some years. That divine barrier is used to monitor the void, the upper plane and the middle plane. I made it when the death mist of the abyss appeared. I didn't expect it to come in handy. Hui let out a sigh and said quietly, "That's a detection barrier. It melts into the void and won't be discovered. Once a life form that's as powerful as me or even more powerful than me appears, the barrier will be triggered and alert me. That's right, that barrier isn't for defensive purposes. It's just an announcement to inform us that a great enemy has appeared and we need to respond urgently." As Hui spoke, he winked at Yun Nuashing. The latter thought for a moment and came to a realization. He roughly knew what Hui was up to. He thought that Hui would directly tell them that the enemy had a life form that was as powerful as the heavenly god of origin. Now, it seemed that he didn't want to tell them for the time being to prevent these fence-sitters, especially the Saint Spirit realm and the Changyuan realm, from scaring them half to death and then running away before the war even started. What they should do now was to gather as much power as possible. There was no way around it even if they were to hide the information. The human heart was the most complicated. It was easy to make it less complicated. "Lord Guardian," the golden-haired young man said softly, "I'm a little worried. A force. The underworld, right? We don't know if the underworld is a force or a world. We also don't know their specific power. I've sensed the energy level of the abyss death mist. Its level on the world ladder is comparable to the primordial realm or even higher. They have the power to destroy countless worlds together. Let's assume that if we combine all the power of our 3 realms together, can we achieve this level?" Everyone frowned. Combining the power of the God realm, the Saint Spirit realm, and the Changyuan realm. It was true that it was a little difficult to achieve this with the power of any one realm alone, mainly because they did not have enough manpower. However, it was not impossible to achieve something like the Abyss Death Mist and the Underworld's battle prowess. Still, if they had to push through the Underworld one by one, they would never be able to form such a complete encirclement. A complete circular encirclement encompasses who knows how many worlds in the void. No matter how weak a world in the lower planes was, it would still require the combat power of a pinnacle heavenly god, or even several pinnacle heavenly gods, to push through a world and directly destroy it. In some places, the counterforce would even be stronger than the middle planes. If that was the case, it would be even more impossible for them to form such a perfect encirclement. In fact, it was possible. Yun Nuashing knew that the Abyss Death Mist had many different characteristics. It could devour all energy, continuously split into spawns, and continuously split into the Abyss Death Mist. It was possible to do this with the infinite energy of the void alone. However, the God realm and the 3 realms could not do this. If the combined power of the 3 realms were to sweep in from the lower planes all the way to the center, it would be easy at first, but the resistance would gradually become stronger. In a middle of the middle planes, the resistance would suddenly become a level higher, and then it would be the upper planes. It would be really difficult for the 3 realms to sweep across the upper planes. The power of the underworld is very strong. I don't know who their strongest is, but I suspect that their leader, the Lord of the Underworld, is a great being who survived the annihilation storm at the end of the primordial era. According to the records of the three realms, there were many Empyrean gods of origin during the primordial era. There were even countless Empyrean gods of origin in the Middle Planes. There were also quite a number of Empyrean gods of origin in the three realms. However, he and the others have all fallen, unable to survive the annihilation storm, and perished in the void. But if there is such a powerful being who survived. The blond youth spoke softly of his guesses and worries in a low voice, but it caused everyone in the hall to frown. Their faces were solemn, and none of them said a word. The Empyrean gods of origin, who had followed Yun Nuoshing into the depths of the first turn of the void, glanced at the two of them. They wisely did not say anything, and did not mention that they had already learned from the Guardian and his friends that the primordial god was still alive. That is indeed something we need to pay attention to. Huey's expression did not change. He glanced at the blond youth and said softly, "But my divine barrier has not triggered the alarm. For now, no one above my level has come to the middle plane, and the underworld's front line has penetrated quite a distance into the middle plane. Although this is just the beginning of a thread for the entire middle plane, it has indeed crossed my barrier and is ignored by it." The blond youth was about to say something, but we reached out to stop him. He stood up and slowly walked to the window and said softly, "Of course, your words have reminded us that in this world, the origin is not the strongest. We may not be the ones standing at the top of the void. There may be more powerful beings lurking in this world, and there may be people of that level in the underworld. So we have to be more careful when we fight and deal with them even more carefully. Don't let your guard down just because your opponents are just a bunch of people who are neither human nor ghost without intelligence. Sometimes it is fatal to fail miserably in the gutter. After all, they have not come out yet. Our opponents should be those from the underworld who started this chaos. If we make mistakes when we fight against these cannon fodders, shiny cannon fodders, how can we fight in the future?" The blond youth was slightly stunned. After thinking for a while, he could not think of anything to refute. He nodded and said, "You're right." Yun Nuoshing rolled his eyes at Hui. This guy was just copying his words. How much time do we have to prepare before the power of the middle plane is significantly weakened? Hui blinked at him, then looked at the heavenly god of origin who was stationed at the edge, and asked seriously. The heavenly god of origin was silent for a while, and did not answer immediately. Instead, he turned around and looked somewhere. His real body did not come over, and only a little of his soul power came over. At this moment, he was probably talking to someone. His expression changed several times, and after a few minutes of conversation, he turned around and said, "Less than 3 months." 3 months! Everyone was shocked. Didn't this mean that the middle plane would lose at least 40% of its power in these 3 months? That would be enough to cause a significant weakening and blow to the power of the entire middle plane. More than half of the middle plane will fall in 3 months. The heavenly god of origin shook his head and said, "The heaven's light realm of the middle plane and a few other large worlds that have formed their own realms are about to join forces. They have instigated more than half of the powerful beings in the middle plane to form a united front and wage war against the underworld. The time will be 2 months later. I'm only speculating on the time they will gather and their chances of winning against the underworld. The chances of winning are very low, so the middle plane is very likely to collapse in that all-out battle? The chances of winning are indeed not high. If they do not have support from the upper plane, their battle may not last for long." Everyone looked at each other, and their expressions became even more solemn. Sometimes it was this kind of complete gathering that made people feel uneasy. You can't put all your eggs in the same basket. Everyone knew this. However, they could also understand the thoughts of the people in the middle plane. Since the underworld was already at their doorstep, why didn't they hurry up and fight back? What were they just sitting there and watching? They watched as the lights of the worlds went out one by one and fell one by one. It was already too late for them to pick up their weapons when the battle was already right in front of them. From this point of view, the people in the middle plane were actually doing much better than them. At the very least, with just a roar and an uprising, they were able to gather a considerable amount of power within 3 months. On the other hand, the people in the upper plane boasted that they had high energy levels, great power, and were not afraid of being beaten. It was not difficult for them to gather together. Hui stood in front of the window and tilted his head to glance at Yun Nuoxing. He gave him a look and signaled him to say something. The latter thought for a while, sat on a chair and stretched. He said in a lazy tone, "All the pillars of creation and the creation's barrier have been fully charged. When we leave, no one can think of bypassing us to break through the creation's barrier." Yun Nuoxing looked back at him and said, "We can fight without worry. We don't have to worry about the people of the underworld raiding our property. As long as it's not Yuanshi. No, even if it's a team of Yuanshi gods, with the uniqueness of this world, the creation's barrier can last for half a month." Hui nodded. Yun Nuoxing continued, "There's no abyssal death fog in the upper plane. There's no sign of distortion in the void. It's unlikely that the people of the underworld would come here to cause trouble. Moreover, since they took pains to shield the upper plane and prevent us from sensing the energy of the outside world, there must be a reason. When all the forces of the upper plane are gathered, it's an unprecedentedly powerful force. If we have this force, we have a good chance of winning." Yun Nuoxing said, "The worlds in the top 100 energy levels are also safe. I've been in contact with many of them before. We can still call for help from 10 or 20 worlds. As for the rest, we'll go and persuade them. If they don't cooperate, we'll tie up the strongest and most influential person in their world and throw them in front of the abyssal death fog. If they don't cooperate, we'll throw them in." Everyone was speechless. The first part sounded normal, but what's with the last sentence? Hui nodded hard. Everyone was speechless. He actually agreed. He even agreed. "All right, this is an emergency. Human rights and not human rights. Those things are useless. If they don't comply, we'll just use a stronger force to suppress them." Yun Nuoxing's veins popped out on his forehead. He took a deep breath and gritted his teeth. Some special worlds may have more in-depth research on combat than the realm of the gods. The realm of the gods is a well-rounded world. It's omnipotent and proficient in all aspects. However, there's no such thing as a single-minded focus. I've traveled to many worlds. Some worlds are quite knowledgeable about prolonged combat, some worlds are very knowledgeable about the use of energy, and some worlds are more suited for such large-scale brawls. Phew! Now that we're fighting in the void, we should be able to make it in time if we're in an emergency. Hui nodded like he was pounding garlic. Yun Nuoxing pointed outside, his face ashen. "If you need to go to the toilet, turn left when you're out there. Don't me here. Are you done?" "Oh." Hui shrunk his neck weakly. Everyone! Their worldview had collapsed. Yun Nuoxing was so angry that he laughed. Half of his sleepiness had disappeared. If it weren't for the serious atmosphere in the hall, he would have thrown this guy into the sky. Everyone in the hall was stunned when they saw the Guardian's fawning expression. They tried to figure out the relationship in their minds but couldn't figure it out at all. They couldn't figure out who was who. Logically speaking, this Guardian was the strongest on the surface. His close friend should be on the same level. However, it seemed a little beyond their imagination. Anyway, the two of them were elusive. The Guardian was rarely seen, and the one beside him was even rarer. Yun Nuoxing also stood up, stretched his back, and let out a long yawn and said, "No matter whether it is increasing our own strength or being on guard against them, it is only one of the steps. And before all of this, we have to go and have a talk with the people of the middle plane, not to mention." He turned to Hui with a serious expression. We can't escape from this battle. However, the thing that will decide the fate of the void is, I know. We have to shoulder this burden. We let out a long sigh. At least, the two of them were the strongest in the eight elements realm. Naturally, they had to shoulder more responsibilities. Moreover, they knew more. They knew what was waiting for them ahead. It was because they knew that there was no way to avoid it. They could only face it head-on. No matter what, they had to face it head-on. Yun Nuoshing and Hui raised their heads and looked at the blue sky with white clouds outside. The sun shone on the realm of the gods. It was still summer, and the sun was shining brightly. The weather was really good. If they didn't have so many worries, they would find a place to lie down and bask in the sun. It was another lazy day. Unfortunately, let's fight and fulfill our respective missions. For our world, for the eight elements realm. Chapter 1199. Wu Hao, the hierarch of the divine court of absolute beginning, had been very anxious recently. He had an inexplicable sense of irritation in his heart. This feeling had been born 4 days ago during the Three Realms gathering, and it hadn't disappeared even today. It lingered above his head like a dark cloud, making him look very haggard. Of course, it could also be because he had been busy these past few days. In any case, his brilliant golden hair was a mess, giving him a rather dispirited feeling. He felt like he was being watched by something, but every time he thought about it carefully, this feeling would disappear without a trace. Everything seemed to be an illusion, but he had been stuck in the origin realm for who knew how many years. How could he still have any illusions? He couldn't find the source of that feeling, and even after meditating for an entire day, he still couldn't find it. He could only let this feeling take root in his heart. He still had something to do. After the Three Realms gathering 4 days ago, the God Realm entered a state of war. News of the underworld had already spread throughout the God Realm, and the actions of the Protectors and the others had also spread. What made the Protectors and the others feel a little gratified was that more than 80% of the people had expressed their support. Whether it was because of their reputation or other reasons, so many people had been pulled together. In short, they had successfully gathered a considerable amount of power. The Saint Spirit Realm and the Chanyuan Realm had also responded today. It was also today that the Three Realms had entered an expedition to the Middle Plane together. That earth-shattering battle formation made everyone's blood boil. He stayed behind. Although he was also an origin god, he wasn't known for his strength. He had the basic strength of an origin god, but it was difficult to ask him to be stronger. He wasn't a fighter, so he was only suitable for making talismans, formations, pill cauldrons, and so on. However, 60% of the people in the divine court of absolute beginning had volunteered to go on the expedition. After the group of people left noisily, the divine court became much quieter. Normally, the divine court would be very noisy. Now, even the god world was much quieter. Whether it was the human race, the Yao race, or even the ancient royal family, 80% of the beings in the god world had charged out. The weakest of them was a high-tier god, and there were as many gods and heavenly gods as there were hairs on an ox. His heart was getting more and more agitated, to the point that he couldn't sit still. The feeling of being watched by something was getting stronger, but his soul couldn't find anything. Wu Hao pushed the book in his hand to the side in frustration. He stood up from his chair and looked up at the void. Now, the expeditionary army should have already arrived in the Middle Plane. The battle there should be quite intense. With the support of the 3 major worlds, the people from the other worlds in the upper plane should have heard the news as well. In the end, the power gathered would be difficult for the underworld to shake. He felt that he should be happy that someone was going to deal with the abyssal death mist, or at least show a little bit of happiness. However, for various reasons, his face was gloomy all day long. Wu Hao once again threw the book in his hand onto the desk in frustration. He walked to the window and pushed open the rectangular window that was almost a meter tall. Looking at the gloomy sky that seemed like a storm was about to descend, he felt even more depressed. "It's going to rain," he murmured. He took in a breath of the hot air and closed the window. He paced around the room for a long time. As the uneasiness in his heart grew stronger, he walked faster. After pacing back and forth a few times, his eyes suddenly widened. He seemed to have woken up and felt something. His body flashed and disappeared from the room. When he reappeared, he was in the lower temple of the Divine Temple. When he appeared again, he was at the bottom level of the Divine Palace of the Taichu Divine Court. This was the forbidden area of the entire Taichu Divine Court. Normally, no one other than him could come here, and he was also doing some unknown things here. Well, it was not quite right to say that it was unknown. It could be considered a type of secret that every faction had. However, his was a little special. He was a researcher, so the things he created were naturally strange. He placed them here only for safety reasons, to prevent stupid people from touching his things without permission and causing a series of dangerous things. The bottom floor of the temple was embedded in the rock layer. There were vines of ancient trees climbing up the walls. The dark and damp bottom floor was covered with black twisted vines. The center of the roots flickered with a faint red light, making this dark underground even darker and stranger. There was a door deep in the bottom floor of the temple. The strange patterns on the door were mostly merged with the surrounding vines, as if they had grown together. Wu Hao pushed the door open with force. A gust of black wind blew out of the space inside with a few gusts of wind, blowing his messy golden hair. Behind the door was a star field, filled with a faint power of the stars and some complete fluctuations of the rules. It seemed to have been forcibly copied from a part of the starry sky and then forcibly moved to this space. It was normal for it to be damaged. To him, this was just a small laboratory, and this part of the starry sky was just a place he casually grabbed to store some dangerous things. If there was any danger, he could bury this space into the void at the first moment. Wu Hao walked into this part of the starry sky and turned to close the door. The space of the galaxy became intact, and no one could tell that there was a door in this place. He seemed to have pushed open a gap in the starry sky and walked in. This space looked rather desolate, and the surrounding space was faintly distorted. The stars in the distance were scattered, and many of them were in an abnormal state of distortion. There were rings, splits, and many others. The starry sky seemed to have encountered something on its long journey, and became like this when it fell into his eyes. The dangerous item stored in this part of the starry sky was also the only dangerous item. It was just lying there quietly. It was pure black, like a black hole in the starry sky. It did not move, but one look at it would cause uneasiness and magnify it infinitely. Along with the uneasiness came an equally strong sense of disgust. The existence of this ink-like thing alone could cause the disgust of countless beings. The abyssal death mist, and it was an extremely condensed mass that took up 1/3 of this part of the starry sky. It actually existed here. If it exploded in the realm of the gods with the characteristics of the abyssal death mist and the characteristics of this first major world, who knows what kind of changes would occur? What was the difference between this and planting man-eating flowers in one's back garden? Wu Hao was not worried about anything. He walked up to the abyssal death mist with ease and familiarity. He had captured this thing tens of millions of years ago and hid it here. He knew about the terrible war in the lower planes and the destructive power of the abyssal death mist. He had spent a lot of effort to capture this mass back then, and now it was imprisoned in this part of the starry sky, bound tightly by countless chains of order. He had studied it here for tens of millions of years, but to no avail. He picked up a cluster of starlight beside him and dived his consciousness into it to read the information inside. After a while, he pushed it aside and walked to the front of the abyssal death mist. Looking at it carefully, There was a thin layer of energy barrier between the place where he stopped and the black mist. That layer of barrier had isolated the latter, and it had been isolated for tens of millions of years. He was not worried that the black ink-like thing would break free. If I were you, I wouldn't touch that thing again. Before Wu Hao could reach out and touch the barrier, a faint voice came from behind him, startling him. However, he wasn't too surprised. He had said that he knew the feeling of being stared at by something, but he didn't know who or what was staring at him. At this moment, when that thing appeared, he was only slightly surprised, and 80% of it was because that thing was standing behind him without him noticing, so he was surprised. This space has been stagnant for tens of millions of years. A cage? Heh. The voice chuckled. Perhaps you think it's very stable, but you haven't noticed at all that this space, this void, has been completely devoured. Perhaps you haven't been here for a long time, so you haven't noticed its movements. The abyssal death mist can't even bind the void, it can even devour it. It's a huge loophole in this world, and the enemy can even use it as a passage to freely wander around the void. How dare you place it here? Wu Hao slowly turned around and then narrowed his eyes. What he saw was perhaps a person. Its entire body was emitting a dazzling white light, and it seemed to have silver hair and silver clothes draped over its body. Even its eyebrows and eyes were so dazzling that he could not see its face clearly. He quietly looked at this person of light. His expression was calm and did not change. He had never seen it before, never seen such a thing. However, the Tao energy that it possessed was extremely frightening and terrifying. It was more terrifying than anyone he knew, even more so than the Guardian, the abnormality of the realm of the gods. So it was hidden in this place. The barrier of the Empyrean god of origin was indeed something I could not penetrate without some effort. I thought it was just a small fry, so I ignored it. I did not expect you to bring me such a big guy. The person who was emitting a dazzling white light stood up from his position leaning against the starry sky. He slowly walked to the barrier and patted it lightly. Then, he reached out and grabbed the cluster of starlight that contained countless information. He grinned. What are you doing? You dare to study something like the abyssal death mist? About the leakage of the abyssal death mist and the emergency measures to deal with it. Oh, and this, the process of the abyssal death mist transforming the life forms of order. The way the abyssal death mist spreads, the abyssal death mist. You are walking on a tightrope. For the Diyuan world, it is all worth it. Wu Hao straightened his back and said firmly. For the Diyuan world? The person suddenly sneered and waved the cluster of light in his hand. Look at this. Ideas on how to pollute the realm of the gods with the abyssal death mist, how to speed up the spread of the abyssal death mist, how to increase the energy density of the abyssal death mist. You call this for the realm of the gods? I even suspect that you are someone sent by the netherworld. He waved the cluster of light in his hand. His voice gradually became cold, and a faint killing intent spread out. Wu Hao's eyes widened in shock. He could only see the information hidden in the cluster of light with his soul power. How could he see it? It is only for research purposes. It is not what you think. Wu Hao shook his head and said in a calm voice, the abyssal death mist first appeared at the edge of the lower plains. I had already discovered it at that time. 60 million years ago, I painstakingly captured a cluster of it. All of my research is to deal with. The person who was emitting a dazzling white light raised his hand and interrupted him. Evidence? Research results? Wu Hao's silence made him laugh even more heartily. You see, it is only your side of the story. Why should I believe those? Compared to those, I believe in another kind of evidence more. It tells me the abnormalities in your body, the distortions in your body. Oh right, there are still results. Look at yourself. How ignorant. Wu Hao's face revealed a blank expression. That person stretched out a finger in his direction and lightly pressed down. Suddenly, a reddish-black light spot appeared on his body. After the light spot appeared, his body turned into an existence similar to energy. That light spot set off a huge energy vortex in the middle of his body, and it kept collapsing downwards. You became the manifestation of the abyssal death mist many years ago. What kind of power bound you? Or did you become it willingly? Wu Hao's expression changed drastically. So that's how it is. You accidentally infected yourself, but you successfully bound that part of yourself, the part that still maintains order. That's why I can only sense a weak abnormality from your body. I can't judge directly. The person who was emitting the white light turned around. An enormous amount of energy that could shake the void crazily appeared in his palm. A dazzling white light crazily appeared. He held this thundercloud that seemed to be releasing thunderstorms and slammed it into the abyssal death mist behind the energy barrier. PFFF, that dazzling white energy turned into a small but condensed crystallized energy beam. It was sent out by that palm and pierced through the entire abyssal death mist. The black gas that had been silent for countless years suddenly surged like boiling clouds. Rumbling energy vibrations spread throughout the entire star system. Stop! The material that he had poured countless years of painstaking effort into was destroyed in the blink of an eye. Wu Hao's eyes instantly turned blood-red. He lunged toward the person who was emitting the white light like a madman. The heavenly god of Origin's vast and mighty energy spread throughout the entire starry sky. He crushed a gem hidden in his left hand without hesitation. His right hand held a formation and talisman that exploded toward the person who was emitting the white light. An enormous energy aura suddenly exploded behind the person who was emitting the white light like a shockwave, shattering the starry sky behind him. The shockwave spread to Wu Hao, causing his charging figure to be instantly swept back. He couldn't help but spit out a mouthful of blood. This thing will only harm the God realm if you keep it. It has already grown to the point where you can't control it and can already devour you. This is why you haven't come to this place recently. What's the point of keeping it? Wait for it to grow a little stronger, tear through the barrier, and rush out to harm the God realm? The person who was emitting the white light beam didn't even turn his head. The dazzling white light beam that shot into the abyssal death mist suddenly exploded, tearing open a huge crack in the starry sky that led to the void. Then, his hands began to move as if they were moving the clouds and the sun, controlling the abyssal death mist to pour into the void. The abyssal death mist that had accumulated and grown for tens of millions of years suddenly surged. Faint traces of it could be clearly seen. It was completely black, and it was very difficult to see a little bit of it. It was as if a piece of cloud had been slashed by a blade. The abyssal death mist that had been dormant for countless years finally woke up and began to release the energy that destroyed the balance and tore the order. However, it was already too late. The person who was emitting the white light looked at it coldly and suddenly clenched his hand. The big crack suddenly erupted with an even more violent suction force, crazily sucking the abyssal death mist into the crack. In less than a few minutes, all of it would be sucked into the big crack and be decomposed by the ultimate chaos in the void, as if it had never existed. Suddenly, a crazy and almost violent energy came from behind him, causing the person who was emitting the white light to frown slightly. He turned around and saw countless black auras mixed with golden auras rushing toward him. The crazy destructive power shattered the starry sky and tore the void apart. The person who was emitting the white light frowned slightly and half turned around. One of his hands was controlling the abyssal death mist to pour into the void, while the other hand was raised. A burst of energy burst out and fiercely grabbed at Wu Hao. Both of Wu Hao's eyes were already blood-red. His blood rushed to his head, and he suddenly felt as if he was in the abyss. A powerful energy that was as strong as the world smashing down on him enveloped him and destroyed all of his aura. His aura was almost frozen. this extremely domineering, and also had an extremely powerful energy that destroyed the balance of the rules. It was just like the abyssal death mist that he had studied for countless years. It was very similar. Both of them were products of loopholes that broke free from the shackles of the rules of order. This kind of aura that existed in the realm of the gods, he had only heard of it once. He was a dancer who walked on the edge of the sword, an expert who was on the edge of courting death. He knew many anecdotes about the realm of the gods. Those who walked on the edge of the rules would be ruthlessly wiped out by a power that appeared out of nowhere if they went deeper. That power walked in the darkness. No matter who it was, they would feel as if they were in the abyss. He had also heard of it and had countless guesses about that person or that power. However, when it really appeared in front of him, he knew that he was wrong, completely wrong. However, he would never allow this guy to destroy his years of hard work. His years of, what had he been doing? What had he done in the past? The abyssal death mist is deeply infected. The surge of blood and chi has even accelerated the infection. Poor guy. The person in white light sighed and shook his head helplessly. You should have let go when you first realized that you were infected. You should have blown this damned place into the void instead of trying to study something with a fluke mentality. In the end, what did you get? What did you study? You stirred up so much trouble. Look at yourself now. Look at what you have become. Wu Hao had already lost consciousness. He was already dead. It would be wrong to say that he was completely dead. Only his weak soul was still bitterly holding on. His consciousness had already been devoured by the abyssal death mist. His skin had begun to darken, and the destructive power of the abyssal death mist had begun to surge wildly in his body and soul. He was evolving into an abyssal death mist derivative, an Empyrean god of origin level derivative. The person in white light frowned. He still could not explain many of the characteristics of the abyssal death mist. If he allowed Wu Hao to completely transform, he did not know if it would affect the even larger dark army behind them. In any case, he had already discovered some inconceivable signs. That guy's research was not completely useless, but it was not worth it to lose the life of an Empyrean god of origin for that little bit of information. You have long been controlled by the abyssal death mist. The person in white light did not care if Wu Hao's remaining soul could hear those words, and simply treated it as if he was talking to himself. It has devoured half of your consciousness, half of your soul, and controls half of your actions. The things you do not know, the orders you do not know are carried out by that other half. Everything it does will eventually cause this treasure you have brought back to explode 1,000 years later. When that happens, the divine realm will become a base camp for the abyssal death mist, a base camp that has erupted in the higher planes. Can you imagine the consequences? Go to hell, reincarnate, and start all over again. You still have a little bit of your soul left, and now you want to, huh? The person in white light stared blankly for a moment. He suddenly sensed a boundless energy reaction from Wu Hao's body that was transforming into a monster. The violent energy was like a great sun that was about to be destroyed, and he could not help but feel astonished. That guy was actually going to self-destruct. No, self-destruct. Was he trying to destroy himself? To destroy that body that was already 80% transformed into an abyssal death mist derivative? If that's the case, do as you wish, Just as the person in white light sighed, he sensed a group of energy appearing at the doorway of this planetary system. That energy, a brilliant and sacred light, tore apart the silence of this dark planetary system. A huge portal abruptly opened in the starry skies, and a large group of people rushed in under the illumination of that brilliant light. Before Hui could steady himself, he saw the abyssal death mist that was boiling and falling into the void. His eyes widened at once, but before he could do anything, Wu Hao's body suddenly expanded. A destructive force that could shatter endless planetary systems swept out from the shattered starry skies, and the explosion that contained the power of laws caused countless people to cover their ears in shock. TSK. Why did he come back at such a good time? That guy even brought me some trouble. Hui pricked up his ears and looked doubtfully at the place where the brilliant light shone. That voice sounded a little familiar. Chapter 1200. An energy storm with the destructive power of laws swept across this star sector. The destructive aura caused a series of destructive impacts in the energy storm, causing the entire star sector to collapse along with the void. The self-destructive energy impact of the heavenly god of origin made the experts of the heavenly realm tremble slightly. They could not help but take a few steps back before it reached them. That level of energy was enough to completely destroy a part of the void in the lower primordial realm from order and law. When it bloomed in the 8th primordial realm, it could also turn that part of the void into nothingness, which could not be restored for countless years. That kind of energy was enough to stir up even more chaos in the void. The scale of the energy storm before them was extremely shocking, but it was not as terrifying as it had been described. The figure of white light and Hui Zheng worked together to stop the energy storm from spreading. Moreover, Wu Hao had chosen to self-destruct instead of self-destruct. 70% of the energy contained in the storm was in the process of self-destruction, which meant that only 30% of the energy that had caused such a destructive impact was effective. The storm lasted for 10 minutes before it gradually subsided and slowly dissipated. The dazzling white light suddenly shrank into a white dot and disappeared. As the destructive storm dissipated, this starry sky, this void starry sky once again appeared in front of everyone. A considerable part of the starry sky had been completely transformed into nothingness and chaos. Everyone could feel the chaotic aura coming from the void. On the other side of the void, there was a human figure emitting a lustrous white light. On the other side of the void was the rapidly disappearing abyssal death fog. The black fog made everyone's pupils shrink slightly. Ignoring the changes in everyone's expressions, the figure of white light waved its hand, and the last of the abyssal death fog fell into the void. The crack was also closed by it. The two groups of people stared at each other for a while. Huey's group had dozens of people, all of whom were heavenly gods of origin, but they all felt an inexplicable fear. The person opposite them gave them an unusually dangerous feeling, which made them feel that it could bypass their guardians and kill them one by one. The void in the starry sky slowly rumbled with the power of laws and order. The remaining weak laws were gradually being repaired. The figure of white light looked at the destroyed space, then raised its eyes to glance at the people in the distance. It silently turned around and walked into the depths of the starry sky. Its figure drifted away like sand in the wind. "Stop!" Seeing this scene, one of the heavenly gods of origin suddenly roared. They had clearly seen what had just happened. One of the heavenly gods of origin had been destroyed in front of their eyes. A white ball of light smashed into his face. The person who spoke was stunned and subconsciously put up his guard. However, he didn't suffer any attack. He let out a small sigh of relief. When he turned his gaze, the guy who was covered in white light had disappeared. Under the strong gaze of the guardian and dozens of people, he disappeared easily as if he was visiting someone. Hui took the ball of white light and read the information inside. He couldn't help but frown. "Lord Guardian, is there a problem?" Seeing this, the person beside him asked nervously. Hui raised his head and looked at the place where the man had disappeared. He then lowered his head and looked at the ball of light. After a while, he stuffed the white ball of light into the hands of the people beside him. "Of course there are problems. Look at what Wu Hao has done all these years." The person who received the ball of light quickly scanned through the information contained in the Guang Yuan. His expression changed more than 10 times within a few seconds. It was as if he was changing faces. One moment it was white, the next it was green, the next it was blue, and the next it was purple. Everyone could see the fear in the last expression. We pondered for a while and said, "You guys clean up this place first." It poured the abyssal death mist into the land of nothingness. However, you still have to be careful. After all, this place has been contaminated by the abyssal death mist for tens of millions of years. I'll go after it and see if I can catch up with that guy. The guardian left in a hurry after leaving a sentence. Many people with uncertain expressions were left behind. However, they quickly collected their emotions and divided up the work to clean up the broken place. The sky was clear and the air was clear. It was summer in the realm of the gods. The scorching sunlight from the two suns shone on the realm of the gods. However, it didn't make the continent lively. The disturbance in the depths of the void had taken away 80% of the life on this bustling continent. It was cold and cheerless. Only the low-level people maintained their lives on the realm of the god. When they were free, they would daydream about the things that happened in the depths of the void. When they were free, they would take a nap in the afternoon when people were the most lazy. They would look at the huge white clouds outside the window. It was very comfortable. While they were at it, they would also say to the people around them, "That cloud is so big. It can even cover a large city." There was only the white cloud in the sky that was hundreds of thousands of miles long and wide. Looking around the sky, there were no clouds anywhere else. It was as if all the clouds had gathered together. Looking down at the cloud from a higher place, one could see a small dot of a different color in the center. If one looked carefully, one could see that the small dot was actually a person lying on the soft white cloud. The person had black hair and black clothes. This color was very eye-catching on the white cloud. As long as one wasn't blind or short-sighted, one could see it. The person who had been lying on top of the clouds since the day started was naturally the famous observer of the realm of the gods, Nuashing. He was an obscure observer who loved to sleep in. His innate talent for sleeping was ingrained in his bones, and his mind was filled with nothing but sleep. Perhaps Feng Ling would be a better name? Nuashing turned over unconsciously. Her palm lazily touched a small piece of cloud. Using the strength that could crush a world's light into the size of a grain of sand, she squeezed the cloud into a solid form. Then, she placed the cloud over her eyes to block the dazzling sunlight of the two suns above. A shadow shone on her body. Nuashing's eyebrows twitched. She squeezed her eyelids to make the cloud move to the side. When she opened her eyes as expected, she saw Hui looking down at her with his hands behind his back. Seeing that she had woken up, Hui grinned and said, "Big lazy bug, you're finally awake?" Nuashing yawned lazily. She scratched her itchy stomach and said, "Didn't you just arrive? Why do you have to say that? Huh. It seems like you've been here for a long time." Then, she suddenly woke up and said, "Wait, didn't you guys go, on an expedition?" Nuashing sat up abruptly and said, "How long have I slept? You guys were all beaten back. The people of the underworld are here?" We stared blankly at her and couldn't help but let out a wry smile. It seemed that this guy was quite self-aware. He knew that he would usually sleep until the end of time. He waved his hand and slowly sat down beside his old friend. Then, he said in a low voice, "One of us, the heavenly origin god, has fallen." Nuashing's expression changed slightly. She came back to her senses and said, "Died? That was fast." Hui shook his head and said, "No, he didn't die on the battlefield. He didn't follow the expeditionary army to the front lines. He was just an origin researcher. Yeah, talismans, spell formations, and the like. He wasn't very powerful. We didn't force anyone to go on the expedition with us, so he stayed in the realm of the gods." Nuashing tilted her head in confusion. "How did he fall in the realm of the gods? I didn't feel a burst of energy that was enough to kill the heavenly origin god. That person used the abyssal death mist. Maybe. He might have used the abyssal death mist to kill Wu Hao, but he threw the abyssal death mist into the void. I thought he wanted the abyssal death mist to spread across the realm of the god. Feng, why do you think? That guy, is he from the underworld? Or something else? Wu Hao sent a signal back to tell us that the realm of the gods had been attacked. Our expeditionary army had just reached a place that was only a few thousand worlds away from the front lines when a group of people rushed back to support us. I thought of many things on the way here, but I didn't think it would be like this. Did we miscalculate something? Even here there is abyssal death mist. Feng? Hui scratched his head and looked very troubled. He had been talking for a long time, but he didn't hear the voice of the person beside him. He turned his head in confusion and was stunned. Yun Nuoxing was lying down again. Hui was dumbfounded. After all this time, he was talking to the air? Feng, don't sleep anymore. Hui anxiously pulled Yun Nuoxing up and shook him left and right. The realm of the gods is in trouble. How can an observer like you be so calm? Yun Nuoxing finally woke up a little after being shaken around. He rolled his eyes and sat up in a daze. Yawn, Hui. Aya, don't worry. Didn't we agree a few days ago that you guys will go on an expedition and leave the rear to me? It's because I'm worried that someone will sneak behind me that I'm staying behind, isn't it? Yun Nuoxing showed a sleepy smile and gave him a thumbs up. I'm an observer. What's going on in the realm of the gods that I don't know? Hui. These 3 yawns made him want to yawn as well. He sighed and shook his head. He looked at Yun Nuoxing and stretched lazily. But isn't the realm of the gods in trouble now? Crack. The sound of bones dislocating caused Yun Nuoxing to fall straight down. He lay there stiffly for a while and said awkwardly, This isn't because, but I really didn't. Hui looked at Yun Nuoxing with an unusually serious and solemn expression. He couldn't say anything. The two of them looked at each other in silence for a while. After a long time, Yun Nuoxing noticed that the clouds below him had drifted far away from the city just now. His eyelids drooped slightly, and after a moment, he suddenly laughed bitterly. Hui, your acting skills are too bad. Hui was slightly stunned. He touched his face. Yun Nuoxing looked at him and shook his head. Since you wanted to raise your doubts from the beginning, why didn't you say it directly? You're not suited for this kind of roundabout way of speaking. Your expression just made the roundabout way of speaking come back to the original track. Is it that obvious? Hui was stunned for a while. His expression finally relaxed. This time, he said in a relaxed manner, Then, that person really is you. He was stunned for a moment because he saw Yun Nuoxing's body emitting a silver-white light. His clothes and hair gradually turned silver-white. His eyebrows and eyes also turned white. His entire body was filled with a bright white light. He saw Hui's surprised expression and asked, Are you surprised? Hui nodded. Yun Nuoxing continued, Actually, I'm more surprised. How did you recognize me? There are 2 reasons. The first is that you spoke. Even if you deliberately altered your voice, it's still too similar. The second is that the only person in the entire god realm who can release that kind of pressure stronger than mine is you. Yun Nuoxing was silent for a while. Then, he helplessly rolled his eyes. Then it seems that my acting isn't good enough. Feng, you want to ask me why I did that. Yun Nuoxing slowly stood up. His previous laziness was swept away and he said, I discovered that there was something wrong with the realm of the gods a long time ago. However, it was very weak, and I couldn't find it. This was something that happened many years ago. I couldn't find it, and I didn't have the patience to continue looking. Because nothing major happened, I gradually put this matter aside. Until 4 days ago, on the day of the 3 realms gathering. Yun Nuoxing turned around and looked at him. That Pope of the Absolute Beginning Divine Court is called Wu Hao, right? He has an anomaly on his body. You know, the observer's eye gave me the power to see some of the distorted and abnormal things that exist in the realm of the gods. Hui nodded. Many times, it was because of this ability that he could solve some problems in advance. It was almost as if he could predict the future. Yun Nuoxing paused for a moment. I've been using the observer's eye to lock onto Wu Hao for the past few days. It was only when he went to the bottom of the temple and saw that thing that I knew where that anomaly came from. Tens of millions of years ago, he captured a cluster of abyssal death mist from the edge of the lower plains. It was the last part that you saw me pouring into the void. He used it as a research material and had been studying it all this time. However, he didn't know that the abyssal death mist had already planted a seed in his soul. He used the power of the heavenly god of origin to suppress it, but he couldn't suppress it forever. One day it would erupt. He would release the abyssal death mist, and that cluster of abyssal death mist had accumulated a terrifying amount of energy over the past tens of millions of years. Once that energy was released, half of the realm of the gods would be destroyed. For the sake of the realm of the gods, I had no choice but to destroy it. Hui was silent for 2 seconds. So you destroyed him as well? No, at least not at first. Yun Nuoxing shook her head. I was only destroying the abyssal death mist. At the time, he hadn't been completely transformed by the abyssal death mist, but later, Hui understood. Later, they made it to the end and saw the scene of Wu Hao's self-destruction. Perhaps the heavenly god of origin that had been transformed into a manifestation by the abyssal death mist was trying to atone for his sins? Or perhaps he didn't want to see himself become an ugly monster, so he chose to self-destruct. Regardless of the reason, Wu Hao had chosen to self-destruct, and they didn't have the chance to ask him again. I think, Hui sighed and wanted to say something, but Yun Nuoxing shook her head. There's no chance. A being that has been deeply corrupted by the abyssal death mist, even the heavenly god of origin, you and I wouldn't be able to save it. Hui, sometimes you don't need to know these things. You just have to fight on the front lines, and I'll keep an eye on everything in the realm of the gods. Hui was silent for a while and suddenly looked up. How long have you been doing these things behind my back? These things? Yun Nuoxing tilted her head. Hui laughed bitterly. I've already asked around on the way to find you, and I know some things. You've been doing a lot of things in secret. I just didn't expect it, and I didn't expect it either. I knew about the executioner that walks in the darkness, and I thought you knew about it too. But you should have your reasons for not doing anything. But I didn't expect that it was you. Alright, even that was exposed, so there was no point in trying to get away with it. Yun Nuoxing shrugged, looked at him, and said seriously, a long, long time ago. It started from the day I assumed the divine title of observer. Huey's expression changed slightly, and he was a little incredulous. Darkness and light are companions, but they will always suppress the light. There are shadows beside the light, and where there is no light, the power of darkness will be raised to the limit, but there is no place that is completely covered by light, just like the realm of the gods. The silver light on Yun Nuoxing's body faded, and she returned to her original appearance. She walked towards the edge of the clouds, and Hui followed closely behind her, not saying a word. Hui, look at this world. What does it look like? Beautiful, peaceful, quiet, prosperous, full of hope, full of vitality, Hui said almost subconsciously. But I can't see these. Yun Nuoxing let out a long sigh. His eyes became deep and profound. This world is fair. It bestows equality upon everyone. Everything is equal. However, that equality sometimes manifests itself in places that no one can see. Before it becomes a reality, everything comes to a full stop. This world is unfair. Before everyone is granted absolute fairness, that time will not come. This is the will of the great Yuan realm, a rule that cannot be changed. It is also because of this that most people's fate is in their own hands. Tens of trillions of beings, billions of beings gathered in the first major world. Origin life forms, outsiders, many, many billions of beings casually taking a step forward would cause countless undercurrents in this world. That's right, undercurrents. Everything I see includes everything you see. This world is beautiful, stable, peaceful, and serene. This world is filled with war, strife, and calamity that never stops. Sin is buried beneath the earth. Human nature is evil, hopeless, and not worth saving. Hui was silent. He looked at the mountains and the land below. They were tens of thousands of miles high in the sky, and could not see the edge of the land. It was vast and boundless, and it was the world that he loved, but this is not something that I can judge. This judgment is worthless to me. Yun Nuoshing sat down at the edge of the clouds, and her legs stretched out of the clouds and swayed gently. This is an inevitable negative effect brought about by this world moving forward. Darkness is eternal, and light is inextinguishable. It's the same principle. Everything in this world is dark, and the light in this world has never disappeared. What they are saying is what they are saying. There is only one truth. This is a series of products brought about by this world moving forward. It has nothing to do with good or bad. I have no intention of stopping its footsteps, and the divine title of observer does not allow me to do so. What I am doing is just clearing the obstacles in front of it. That's right, it has nothing to do with good or bad. Just like the eternal dynasty that was destroyed by the mysterious power 1,225,991 years ago. Huey's expression changed. He knew of that dynasty. He had once said that if that dynasty was not destroyed, it would one day become the most powerful force in the realm of the gods. It seemed that the dynasty was destroyed 100 years after he said that. The dynasty, including the 12 Empyrean gods, was completely destroyed overnight without anyone noticing. What do you think they did wrong? That they were executed by that mysterious power, by me? Hui looked at Yun Nuoshing, who had a mysterious smile on her face, and shook his head blankly. They were doing something dangerous back then. I don't remember many details, but it seems to have something to do with those big slumbering things underground. Perhaps they wanted to wake them up and get something from them. I don't remember. Anyway, that's the reason. If they had succeeded in doing that, the entire Prime Plane region would have been dragged into the abyss. You don't have to remember anything. No one would know on the surface. If the realm of the gods hadn't told me, I wouldn't know either. I've done similar things many times. At first, I was unwilling, then I became numb. Then, I judged that it was necessary to execute them. I don't feel anything anymore. It's a very simple judgment process. It's, whoever is doing something suicidal, if they can't be stopped, they'll be executed immediately. Hui, if you were in my shoes, what would you do? You would try your best to persuade them and find a way to make them stop, wouldn't you? Humanitarianism? Or Shinto? Yun Nuoshing continued, but if you knew that their every action would cost not only their own lives, but countless people, even a world and half the void because of their actions, what would you think then? Would you kill them for something they didn't do, but would do? You wouldn't. You, who are always in the light, can't see the darkness. You wouldn't do such a thing. But someone must do such a thing. It's not for anyone, it's not for the common people. It's just so that the realm of the gods can continue to move forward. That's all. Hui raised his head and looked at him blankly. His gaze was a little dazed. Countless years. How many years had they walked together? Spring went and autumn came, the sea of time exhausted, all things turned into eternity. He felt as if this was the first time he got to know this close friend of his. For the first time, he knew that Yun Nuoshing didn't just lie lazily in the clouds all day long. Feng, what about you? The light that fell into the darkness. Me? Yun Nuoshing showed a self-deprecating smile. The element of extinction. Hui, haven't you seen clearly what I've become? That's right. That's a stupid question. Hui closed his eyes. He could only feel endless fatigue erupting from the depths of his body. That's why, I just need to bear all these. I don't want you to know, and I don't need you to know these things. Hui, you're someone who lives in the light. You don't need to know these things. You don't need to come into contact with these things. Forever. I hope that you never know. You just need to smile every day and live in the light. These things aren't that big of a deal. Hui looked at Yun Nuoshing's serious expression and lowered his gaze. Even if he fell into eternal darkness. Chapter 1201. Pain, helplessness, tiredness. I didn't know what the big picture was. I just wanted to live every day leisurely, not caring about anything. I have no family in this world. If we're talking about family, Hui, you're probably the only one left. We've been through endless time together, and it hasn't changed for countless years. When I first came into contact with those things that were related to the big picture, I didn't care and resisted at first. That was why the disaster that broke out in the realm of the gods woke me up. Later, I pinched my nose and did it. I didn't want to, but I didn't want to see the big news in this world every few days. When I woke up again, I had become numb. I no longer judged anything based on my emotions. The observers I told me that there were abnormalities, so I eliminated them. Those people were all executed by me. Bloody, cruel, and ruthless. These are the words that best fit the description of the executioner in the Dark Night. It's a list of the executioner. Later on, I was tired. Time was still the same. I began to understand some things. I no longer resolutely dealt with any abnormalities. Even so, there were still things that should have happened. I stood high above the clouds and looked down at this world. It was as if I was looking at a world that I had built. I watched it change little by little, grew little by little. Hui tilted his head and looked at Yun Nuoshing. He stared at that beautiful face as he calmly told the other half of the things that he didn't know. He remained silent and listened quietly. As he said, there was no absolute fairness in this world. This was the clergy that the realm of the gods had given to him. The other half that he shouldered belonged to the dark side. It was a world that he didn't know. It was a world that was dim. This world was not completely bright, nor was it completely dark. It was an exquisite gray. Those who stepped into the light would be guided by the guardian, and those who fell into the darkness would be punished by the observer. This world maintained its balance and would not be broken. Except for the external forces. The force that filled the void now was very dark. Its power was gradually dragging the entire realm of the 8 elements into the dark abyss. You still have things to do, right? Yun Nuoshing smiled. His smile was a little dazzling. Hui did not know why he could still smile after going through so much. You must be worried about the middle plane. Then go. I'll take care of the rear. Nothing will happen. Hui nodded silently. Feng, what do you think? There were quite a few people who saw that scene with me, and they weren't idiot. There's no way they'd be fooled by me. If an Empyrean god of origin were to die while the expeditionary army was on an expedition to the Middle Plains, everyone would be panicking. Let's just talk about the facts. Let's say what the observer discovered and did. Yun Nuoshing waved her hand. Anyway, you have seen the information in the cluster of light. They will judge all of this on their own. Well, they are not stupid. Sooner or later, they will associate this matter with the observer they have never met. Hui stayed here for an entire day. He looked at Yun Nuoshing with a strange expression the entire time. It made the latter's hair stand on end. She felt like she was sitting on pins and needles the entire day. It was rare for her to be able to stay awake for an entire day, but it was all because she was scared. Hui's expression, Feng, I'll leave the realm of the gods to you while I'm away. The next morning, Hui got up and left. They had important matters to attend to. What happened in the middle plane? They had come back suddenly and left the army of the three realms there. He was a little worried, so he stayed for an entire day. He was only relieved when he found that Yun Nuoshing was no different from before. Don't mess around before I come back. Don't make any big news. Now that 80% of the beings in the realm of the gods have left with us, there shouldn't be any abnormalities. Don't worry. Hurry up and go. Yun Nuoshing waved her hand lazily and rolled around on the cloud. Her eyelids twitched as if she was about to fall asleep. Hui shook his head in annoyance. If you have time, you should get up and move around. You've been sleeping all day and your bones are getting rusty. Yun Nuoshing's cheeks trembled fiercely, and his mouth made a few murmurs. After thinking for a while, he felt that he still had to argue. He turned around abruptly, but Huey's figure had disappeared from the cloud behind him, which made him a little depressed. This guy was so fussy. How many years had passed? What could have happened to him? In the Guardian Temple, the heavenly gods of origin, who had come back with Hui to support the realm of the gods, looked at each other impatiently. They glanced at each other. There had been many messages from the Middle Plain. The expeditionary army that had just settled down seemed to be making a big move. As for what kind of big move it was, how would they know? Right now, they only wanted to rush over and take a look. Unfortunately, the leader of the expeditionary army hadn't returned yet, so they couldn't just run out on their own. This was one of the reasons why they were so anxious. The other reason was that they had seen the scene below the Taichu Divine Court yesterday. They had learned a lot of things from that ball of light and found it hard to believe. At this moment, the Guardian had chased after them again, so they could only wait here patiently. A dark blue teleportation gate suddenly appeared in the air, startling everyone. Huey's figure slowly emerged from it. The expression on his face was a little strange. He seemed to be in a good mood, but also a little more serious. As soon as he appeared, he stretched out his hand to everyone. Let's go. There are still people waiting for us in the Middle Plain. Everyone nodded subconsciously. Then, they were all stunned. Someone couldn't help but ask, Lord Hui, what happened yesterday? Don't worry about what happened yesterday. You all know the cause and effect. Hui shook his head. The realm of the gods is very safe. Many old friends are sleeping in the realm of the gods. The one you saw yesterday was one of them. They don't move much. They only come out to move their rusty bodies when there is a threat in the realm of the gods. I see. Everyone heaved a sigh of relief. They were relieved to know that there were people guarding the realm of the gods when they left. After all, they didn't know how long they would be gone this time. What if they returned to the realm of the gods and saw a ruin? They wouldn't even have a place to cry. That was why they were slightly worried when they saw the scene yesterday. Now that they heard the Guardian's words, they were instantly relieved. They weren't worried about the battle at the front line. They were only worried that when they turned back, they would find that their home was gone. Let's go. They are still waiting for us. Hui swung his robe and waved his hand. A huge dark blue hole was torn open in the space. The spatial energy rolled like a storm. He took the lead and walked into the passage. The others moved around and followed him into the teleportation gate. As everyone disappeared, the teleportation gate slowly closed. Only the remaining spatial energy was quietly dissipating. In a place countless distance away, a silver light flickered slightly, and the scene of the empty hall disappeared from his eyes. Yun Nuoshing rubbed his eyes, looked up at the empty sky, and was silent. For a moment, he suddenly felt a little bored, and did not even plan to sleep. There's nothing to do. The strongest people left in the realm of the gods are only a few heavenly gods. So boring. Yun Nuoshing rolled around on the clouds, treating this vast and boundless cloud layer as a bed, and many messy thoughts ran through his mind. A few minutes later, he lifted his face that was buried in the clouds and slowly propped himself up. He said to himself, I'm bored. Let's go and take a look. She was crazy. She had said tens of millions of times that she wouldn't go. She wanted to stay behind and look after their home. Now that she was too bored, she wanted to go there. Yun Nuoshing said she wanted to leave. She didn't leave immediately. She floated into the air, and the divine staff appeared in her hand. She held the divine staff in front of her with both hands. She closed her eyes and muttered to herself for a moment. A ray of silver light leaked out from the gap in her eyelids. She suddenly opened her eyes and stomped the divine staff in the air. A silver and colorful energy halo suddenly spread out and spread thousands of miles away. Buzz! The halo spread into the distance and then disappeared. However, the sky above the realm of the gods changed. A layer of transparent colorful light covered the entire sky and spread from the ends of the horizon to the center. From the inside of the realm of the gods, it looked like a transparent energy membrane. But from the outside, it looked like a layer of crystal-like energy barrier. It appeared from the two ends of the realm of the gods and spread toward the center of the realm of the gods. It looked like a lid that was slowly closing and covering the realm of the gods. A faintly discernible rumble could be heard, indicating to Yun Nuo that the seal had been completed. The sky became transparent again, so clear that one could see the bottom. The colorful and silver transparent energy film just now was not discovered by anyone. Yun Nuoshing was just about to open a teleportation gate and rush out. His mind spun and he suddenly stopped. He looked at the ground below and muttered to himself for a moment. Then, a transparent energy aura emerged from his body and floated to a meter in front of him. It wriggled and turned into his appearance. Yun Nuoshing looked at the simple soul doppelganger and nodded. Well, it's not a problem if the guardian and observer are not in the realm of the gods. But the situation is different now. It's better to leave some tricks up our sleeves. The soul doppelganger tilted its head and looked at the main body blankly. It stood there silently and did not say a word. Just make do with it. I don't think anyone can break through the creation's barrier. Yun Nuoshing grinned and said to the soul doppelganger, when we're not here, you look after the realm of the gods. The soul doppelganger received the order and nodded. Its body swayed and dissipated into a transparent soul energy and merged into the creation's barrier. The element of nirvana hung on his back like a pair of soft wings. He reached out and stroked it. His eyes were cold as he looked at the realm of the gods. A moment later, his eyes became helpless. He smiled bitterly and said, I hope nothing happens before I come back. In his memory, the realm of the gods did not end well in the Dark Age. He just did not know if it was caused by the war at the end of the era or his body kept flying higher and higher. Gradually, he came to the outside of the realm of the gods. He looked down at the entire realm of the gods. This was the position. He felt dazed just standing there. In the dream, he was in this position. Yes, even the details were similar. He was sure that this was the place. He shook his head. It was a similar place, but not now. It happened at the end of this era. It was still early now. The 51st era had just reached the middle of the Dark Age. It was still early, but it passed in a flash. The middle plane was like a cage. The entire Eight Elements realm was like a cage. It was a huge cage that trapped the power of darkness. The war between the abyss of death fog and the world of order was like a war between prisoners and jailers. However, the ferocious prisoners were beyond the imagination of all the jailers. The defense line they built and all their defensive measures were disappearing at an extremely fast speed. The primordial realm, which had been reborn in the void for 11 eras, was suffering an unprecedented disaster. In the void, lines of formations, talismans, runes, as well as many energy networks and energy nodes, were gradually collapsing. The large net they formed was being destroyed one by one under the corrosion of the dark power, and the bright void was gradually being extinguished. The defense line was collapsing. It was a premeditated collapse. It was deliberate. Yes, the many defense lines in the void were just defense lines. There was no life left to guard them. They were just lifeless things like magic circles and runes. If they were destroyed, then so be it. Many things had been damaged in this war. It was not a big deal to lose this little thing. When the oppressive power of darkness pushed into a place, the void suddenly burst with countless breaths of life. The life of order was gushing out like a fountain. The power gathered from thousands of worlds burst out at this moment, forcibly stopping the advancing abyss of death fog. Many people, countless lives from different worlds and places were burning their hot blood for the same goal at this moment. This phenomenon appeared everywhere in the void and burst out at the same time. Many places rose up at the same time. It was like serfs who had been oppressed for countless years had suddenly turned over. The encirclement that had pushed into half of the 8 elements realm was facing an unprecedentedly strong resistance for the first time. It was even showing signs of being pushed back. Countless energies and countless lives were no longer gushing out like a fountain. Instead, they rushed out from the void like a waterfall. A large number of defensive measures and zones were launched at the same time. Defensive positions of various sizes were drawn in the void. When these positions were connected, they formed a somewhat crooked line. It was a dividing line that completely separated the craziest part of the void from the part of order. Wow, they're already fighting? When Yun Nuoshing came to the void of the middle plane, this was the scene he saw. The flames of war soared into the sky. Even with the characteristics of the void, this level of indiscriminate energy bombardment could not be dealt with. The void was forcibly used as a normal battlefield for the battle. Seeing this, Yun Nuoshing was stunned. Didn't they say that there were still 3 months? Oh yes, he was confused. Although the worlds in the void all lived on the same timeline, their own time was different. 3 months in the middle plane could be 1 or 2 years for some worlds that moved faster. Speaking of the timeline, Yun Nuoshing tilted his head to look at the void, a dark yellow light appearing in his eyes. The hundreds of timeline worlds he knew had all collapsed into the main timeline, the axis of the origin. Perhaps there were even more worlds mixed in. As for how many there were to explore with the concept of infinity, there was no lower or upper limit to that number. Even so, the lower plane was still falling rapidly, and the entire process lasted almost 10 eras. Ah, he understood now. No wonder it took so long. The other timeline worlds had been forcibly merged into the axis of the origin. No wonder he felt that there was an abnormal time disturbance in the void recently. The multiple timeline worlds were originally parallel to each other. Now, the abyssal death mist was using an unreasonable force to squeeze them all together. No wonder it took 10 eras to break through the entire lower plane. Damn it, they were really planning to sweep through the entire primordial realm. Yun Nuoshing was about to secretly tell Hui and the others about this discovery when he felt an unusually large and very familiar energy presence. His gaze immediately turned to a part of the void where a crack had opened. Figures with long auras that were enough to shake the void slowly appeared. Their arrival caused both sides to stiffen. The heavenly gods of origin from the upper plane, some of whom were powerful heavenly gods from the divine realm, had also appeared. It seemed that Hui and the others had been paying attention to the situation in the middle plane, and had followed closely behind when they saw the heavenly gods of origin from the upper plane. I might be discovered if I hide here. Yun Nuoshing rubbed his hair that was hanging down and stealthily retreated from the void. Although the chances of encountering a battle that permeated the entire void were very small, what if he was that lucky? It was best for him to slip away first. Besides, he wasn't here just to watch the show. Moving rapidly in the depths of the void, Yun Nuoshing sensed the ridiculously thick battle zone, and even he was a little speechless. The dividing line between madness and order was the last line of defense, and the true battle zone stretched from there to the depths of the void. Even though he had been cruising in the void for several minutes, he could still feel the intense battle in the void he was in. Yun Nuoshing passed through the battle zone peacefully. Nothing or anyone on either side had noticed him, and only the heavenly gods of origin could sneak past the abyssal death mist's blockade. Once again arriving at the lower plane and sensing that everything had quieted down, Yun Nuoshing slowed down a little. His body began to float up from the depths of the void to the surface. Gradually, he could see world radiances appearing, and when he arrived at the void plane where the world radiances were, he saw a mess of ruins. Countless fragments of world radiances, as well as many inexplicable remains and corpses, were thrown carelessly into the void. It was another mass grave where endless worlds were buried, and the echoes of the destruction of worlds were quietly telling him of the tragedy here. It was as if weeping and complaining, and that sound filled the entire void. It was truly tragic. That was the feeling no matter how many times he looked at it. Who knew how many worlds and lives were buried in the void? It would take a great effort for the void to dissolve all of those remains into nothingness. Those world fragments did not naturally vanish. The entangled rules were exceedingly complex, and the more complex they were, the harder it would be for the void to break them down. It was a gravestone that would last for a very long time, perhaps even until the end of the void. Yun Nuoshing moved horizontally through the void, looking sideways at the void graveyard. He silently closed his eyes and mourned for a few seconds, before his body continued to leap through the void, passing through a portal and arriving at his destination. His vision swayed, and there were specks of starlight in the distance. He had sneaked into a certain world and observed the scene in this star field. His eyes fell on a planet below. It was an extremely strange planet. It was a territory that had been forcibly divided into two halves by some external force. The left half was full of violent and twisted dark forest. The dark forest entangled into a ball like a huge tumor reaching into the starry sky. It was like an eyeball, and its surface was covered with endless dark red patterns. The light it emitted was enough to make people go crazy. It was half distorted, and only half was left. The other half could not be more normal. White clouds, seas, and mountains covered the other half of the decaying world, as if everything was no different from any other world. Abnormal, so abnormal that it was as if it had lost its strength after being partially modified by the death shroud of the abyss. Even so, half of the planet was in fact large enough for it to maintain its existence and keep splitting. Yun Nuoshing looked at the planet for some time, before turning his gaze even further away. It was a planetary system without any starlight, the entire space covered by a complete circle. The dark space was filled with unusual energy, and the range of that energy radiation just so happened to envelop the planet, forming that bizarre shape. The black hole of the abyss. He had come here again. If we knew that he had come here, he would definitely bring a carriage of people and rush over to tie him up and bring him back. That was why he had come here secretly. Because he really could not let it go. The voice that he heard in this world, the unusual scene in the black hole of the abyss that he was extremely concerned about, was not a joke. He was really about to see something last time, but this time, he had all the time. Yun Nuoshing scratched his head. It's better to set a time energy ring, lest I sit here for 1,000 years. Let me think, let's set it for 1,000 years, 100 years. After 100 years, the middle plane had greatly changed. He thought carefully again, and set it for a year. Then, he sat lazily among the stars and began to meditate. Chapter 1202. What he saw in the darkness was a dazzling radiance, a dazzling and beautiful 5-colored radiance. Oh, this was not a bad sentence, and there was nothing wrong with it. This was the scene in the black hole of the abyss that Yun Nuo planet saw at first glance. This scene could easily give people an illusion. They did not know whether the darkness was an illusion or the colorful light was an illusion. In any case, two things that should not have appeared together had appeared just like that. Why couldn't the darkness and the radiance appear? Because the concept and law of the abyssal black hole was darkness. That was a reality that could not be changed. That was one of the discordant aspects of the abyssal black hole. At first, it could not be seen. Yun Nuoshing changed his vision many times, allowing his eyes to adapt to many different laws. That was how such a thing appeared in the purest darkness of the abyssal black hole. Upon closer inspection, one would realize that the colorful radiance was a colorful fountain that spewed out endless energy from the mouth of the abyssal black hole. However, those energies could not escape the edge of the abyssal black hole. They would be pulled back by the gravitational force at the center of the abyssal black hole when they were close to the surface, forming a beautiful oval ring. The flickering radiance was a sign of their flow. Putting aside the abnormal and discordant scene, this was a rather beautiful place. The colorful radiance could decorate the dark, starry sky. Half a month had passed. This scene was the result of Yun Nuoshing's countless observations of the abyssal black hole. It was also the result of his first observation. He could already see this thing when he was forced to return to the realm of the gods by Hui Yi. Half a month had passed, and that was all he could see. The only improvement was that he could see only one color to the current colorful radiance. He did not know what the colors of the energy in the abyssal black hole represented. It was gorgeous and had a strange beauty. From the radiance, he could see something different. The land was dyed pink, the desert was covered in crystals, and a crystal-like forest. Those were the things he saw when he stared at the radiance, and some of them were so beautiful that it was soul-stirring. Beautiful? No, that was a lie. Every scene in this place was a lie. He was not far from the abyssal black hole, and all around him was a pervasive presence of distortion. There was also a sense of oppression and repulsion everywhere. This feeling was now all over the void. How much damage it had caused, how many worlds it had destroyed, who knew? Anyway, Yun Nuoshing didn't believe that it was related to anything beautiful. This place is really uncomfortable. Yun Nuoshing frowned. He had been doing this for 2 days. He had been sitting here for half a month, and he began to feel that something was wrong. The slight discomfort made him feel a little irritated. He always subconsciously looked around, trying to find the source of the discomfort. However, he did not need to look anywhere else. He only needed to look at the black hole in front of him. All the oppressive aura came from it. He was just too close to it and was within its radiation range, so he felt the oppressive aura coming from all directions. He also knew that he could not see anything by looking around. It was just a subconscious action, but he was already a little irritated now. Fortunately, he had only set an alarm clock for a year. Now it seemed that the alarm clock was not used. He had no chance to enter a deep meditative state at all. The reason was very simple. Early in the morning, the neighbor was roaring on the east side of the river. If it were anyone else, they probably would not be able to sleep. Well, except for some people. He had been constantly entering the range of the abyssal black hole for the past half a month. Yes, he had really entered it. The transparent barrier behind him had just opened not long ago, and he had slipped in through the hole. The oppressive aura he felt had nothing to do with that. He had already felt the unpleasant aura long before that. The unfriendly atmosphere had always existed here. He was just a little closer to it, and from the looks of it, he was not used to it. He was now thinking about what level of energy he should use to get rid of this thing so that he would no longer feel this uncomfortable aura. Well, this thought disappeared in a flash. He did not even know if he would be the one to get rid of this thing or if it would kill him. Buzz, walala. Yun Nuoshing's mind was filled with irritation when he suddenly heard a ringing sound in his ears. He was stunned. How could this happen with his body structure? Before he could figure out what was going on, the ringing sound in his ears disappeared again. It was followed by the soft sound of water. It was very soft, but it was slowly getting louder. It was as if he was walking in a forest, and there was a waterfall deep in the forest. He followed the rugged mountain path around the forest and approached the waterfall. The sound of water was getting louder and louder. Yun Nuoshing immediately focused his attention. At this time, he realized that there was an unusually bright light in front of him. Beams of light that were as huge as galaxies rushed in front of him and stopped not far away from him. Then, as if they had suddenly retreated, they turned into a ring and fell backward. He was so focused on the sudden changes in front of him that he did not feel the irritation in his heart gradually weaken. He only focused on the light in front of him with a puzzled expression. It was really strange. He had been here for a few days, and this was the first time he had seen such a movement. However, the light in front of him was really bright, and it seemed to be gradually approaching him. Speaking of which, the light in the shape of an oval ring seemed a little familiar. He seemed to have seen it somewhere before, not too long ago. Yun Nuoshing suddenly reacted. Looking at the colorful lights in front of him that had formed a ring, cold sweat instantly dripped down. This was the energy beams that were floating in the black hole of the abyss. They looked weightless and light like ribbons. At this moment, they were right in front of him. He felt that he should retreat to a safe distance. He rubbed his palms behind him and carefully took a few steps back. Then, more cold sweat appeared. He slowly turned his stiff neck and looked behind him. He did not know when the distorted starlight had moved so far away from him. It was not that something strange had happened in the black hole of the abyss, but he did not know when he had approached the black hole of the abyss. It looked like he had been sucked in by it. His body was going to die. Well, he felt like he was going to die here. He did not feel any sense of death, and the heavenly origin god's almost prophetic ability was not triggered. Anyway, he felt like he was going to die. The dazzling, translucent, and blue energy beam was rapidly approaching him. He did not feel like he was falling or being sucked in at all. He only knew that he was constantly falling. He wanted to run away. In the last half a minute, he had thousands of thoughts of running away. However, the void travel, which had worked so well in the past, was now silent. Space and the void were ignoring him. In other words, he could not run away. His expression was as if he was constipated, and he did not feel anything respond to him for a long time. Yun Nuoshing took a deep breath. The heavenly origin god's energy was fully unleashed, forming the most powerful energy defense around his body. The elements of annihilation were frantically brewing in his palms. Just as he was about to do this, the energy beam that was as huge as a galaxy finally came crashing toward him. The boundless energy impact, the shattering of the barrier, the disintegration of the laws, and so on did not happen. Yun Nuoshing, who had mentally rehearsed this scene dozens of times, was stunned. He felt like he had been given the cold shoulder. Yun Nuoshing relaxed a little. However, he did not dare to relax completely in this place. After thinking for a while, he roughly understood why there was no collision. First of all, this dazzling brilliance was what he saw when he channeled the power of laws into his eyes. In layman's terms, he saw things that he could not see under normal circumstances. Things that could not be seen by the naked eye were generally untouchable in this state. However, he could feel it. That's right, he could still feel it. When his body fell into the energy beam that was a fusion of ice and blue, he could indeed feel a huge amount of energy flowing past the layer of energy barrier on the surface of his body. It was like an endless river flowing past him. He could even hear a faint rustling sound echoing in his ears. The scene in front of him changed. He seemed to see a snowy white continent in front of him. The wind and snow covered the icebergs and glaciers below. The frozen continent was so vast that it was jaw-dropping. He could not see the end of this continent even with his eyesight. However, he could see the entire divine realm with a single glance. Without the help of the observer's eye, it was true. With the Empyrean God's level, it was normal for him to see the entire world with a single glance. However, he could not see the end of this continent in front of him. Moreover, He was sure that there were no repeating shapes in this distant place. He thought for a while and connected the scene in front of him with the illusion that he was imagining. He felt that it was natural that he could not see the end of this place. He nodded subconsciously, then reached out and dug out a ball of snow. Yun Nuashing. He stared blankly at the ball of snow in his hand for a long time. It felt like a year. He only reacted when part of the ball of snow in his hand began to melt under the influence of his body temperature. The faint chill stimulated his senses and made him realize that this was not an illusion. I think that there's something wrong with my soul. Yun Nuashing felt that the strange energy in this place was causing a part of his senses to be unable to recognize normally. Well, it should be a part of it. He did not know if there was a problem with his vision or his sense of touch. In any case, there was a problem. He would not be surprised by anything that happened in this abyss. There's no problem. This is a strange place. Your senses will deceive you, your soul will deceive your consciousness, and your consciousness will deceive your senses until you can no longer recognize yourself. This ethereal voice made Yun Nuashing immediately go on alert. The Netherruin's sword shot out with a clang and pointed to the side. The destructive nature of the Netherruin's sword cut a huge crack in the icy ground in front of him. A pure white figure appeared from the dark shadows. Its appearance caused the energy beam in front of him to shift sideways. After a while, Yun Nuashing saw the energy beam quickly leave behind him. The snow-covered continent also disappeared from his sight. However, his still wet palms told him that it was not an illusion. At least, it was not all an illusion. Yun Nuashing stared at the pure white figure. It looked a little like him in that state. Its entire body was releasing a silver-white light. It was so bright that he could not see it clearly. It was not as bright as him. The person in front of him could be considered a person for the time being. After all, the appearance was quite similar. However, he could not tell whether the person was a man or a woman. He could not tell what the person looked like. How should he put it? It was like a ball of light had turned into a human form. Or rather, a person's body had turned into a pure silver-white light. Who are you? Yun Nuashing's sharp senses noticed that his fall had stopped. He had stopped in this place where everything was dark. The distorted starry sky had become a hollow cylinder, twisted into rings and circles. As for the surrounding environment, it was still the same. However, he could clearly feel that the oppressive feeling was gone. It was completely gone. He seemed to be standing in a world with infinite order. The only difference was that he could not feel the presence of order. While he was questioning, he still had the mind to look around. The only thought that came to his mind was to escape. However, he did not know how to do so. Half an hour ago, his connection with the void and space had been completely severed. Now, he was trapped in this damned place. He did not know whether it was a person or a ghost in this damned place. What could he do? He was really desperate. Once he was desperate, his mind would start to wander. If he had known this would happen, he would have listened to Hui and stayed in the realm of the gods. If he had known this would happen, he would not have come to this place. If he had not come here, he would not have seen a ghost. My apologies. I'm not a ghost. The white light in front of him suddenly spoke. His voice was ethereal, even softer than the sound of the wind. However, it was firmly imprinted in his mind, causing him to turn pale with fright. He had indeed seen a ghost today. He did not know what kind of ghost he had met, but it could even read his mind. The white light in front of him seemed to be a little resentful. He shook his head helplessly and did not intend to correct him. He floated in front of Yun Nuashing and looked at him with interest. This is the first time I know that there is another thing in this world. This world. Yun Nuashing frowned. Yes, this is the world. It's infinite. There are only floating colors everywhere. Other than that, it's just a black hole. There's nothing else. The white light in front of Yun Nuoshing stopped 1 meter in front of him. He looked at Yun Nuoshing. You seem a little different from me. Yun Nuoshing smiled bitterly. You don't even have a face. You only have a rough outline of your body. It would be a miracle if you could be the same. Oh, he had really seen a ghost today. Can you stop talking about ghosts? You're the ghost. The white light in front of Yun Nuoshing angrily waved his small fist at Yun Nuoshing. Then, he said in the next second, I don't have a face. Appearance. So you need an appearance to communicate with other things? Yun Nuoshing grimaced. He felt uncomfortable all over and his hair stood on end. The feeling of having his mind read by someone else was really terrible. Ah, you don't like me looking at you? The white light in front of him tilted his head. The colors dimmed a little and brightened a little. He seemed to be expressing some emotions, as if he was thinking about something. You call this looking? Yun Nuoshing had a headache. Please, you're reading my mind. You're reading my mind. How can I be happy when you're reading my mind? Ah, but that's what you told me. White light scratched his head. Your thoughts are constantly drilling into my body. You're thinking about a lot of things. You woke me up. Me? Yun Nuoshing was dumbfounded. Yes. White light nodded. The light in his body flickered a few more times. Then, he looked Yun Nuoshing up and down. Yun Nuoshing's hair stood on end and he had goosebumps all over his body. Then, the figure that was just a ball of light slowly changed in the next second. His body became contoured, and his face also changed a little. Yun Nuoshing looked at the ball of light that was changing into a living person. Moreover, this blurry appearance, before he could recognize the faint contour, white light's figure froze. His blue-golden hair fluttered in the wind. His figure was tall and slender. Coupled with his blank expression. Yes, he was a living example of a silly dragon. This told him two things. The first was that he had indeed brought back the memories of dozens of eras later. The second was, that fellow was indeed peeping at his memories. You're the one who instilled it in me. You even woke me up. Bing Er put her hands on her waist and said angrily to him. This made Yun Nuoshing collapse even more. He felt that he might have been dreaming the whole day. He had a bad dream. Perhaps it had something to do with sleeping too much. It's not a dream. Forget it. White light sighed and gave up on talking nonsense with him. Then, he asked, What are you doing here? How would I know what I'm doing here? Yun Nuoshing rolled his eyes fiercely. He had nothing better to do. Also, can you change your appearance? It feels a little awkward. When he thought of that silly dragon having such a vivid expression, he felt that his worldview had been turned upside down. Bing Er wrinkled her nose. The light on her body rippled like water. Then, in the blink of an eye, a new appearance appeared. She had long dark purple hair and a long purple dress. She said in the same voice as the owner of this appearance, How about this one? I think she occupies a lot of weight in your mind. What do you mean by a lot of weight? I think you must be wrong. Yun Nuoshing jumped up with a cry. His face was slightly red. I can't be wrong. Your mind is not disguised. Even if it is disguised, I can still see through it. Xian said firmly. Then, she said, well, if you care so much, I can change to another one. I think the other one has a lot of weight too. Don't, a ray of light flashed. White light changed again. This time, it turned into Feng Er's appearance. Yun Nuoshing's face fell. What are you doing here? I didn't do anything. There's nothing I can do. Feng Er said in a matter-of-fact tone, It's you who came into my world. I wanted to ask you what you were doing here. You disturbed my sleep. Well, that was a very honest speech. Yun Nuoshing felt that he must have a lot in common with her. Bah! This is your world? Yun Nuoshing noticed what he said just now. When she thought of what he said before, she felt a chill down her spine. Well, White light was silent for a moment. Then, it scratched its head and muttered, "I thought so. But there are no flowers or plants in this world. There are no mountains or lakes. There are not many things that should be in a world. Can it be called a world?" Yun Nuoshing was stunned for a moment. After a while, she reacted. Did white light see the appearance of another world from her memory? So, she felt that this eternal dark and lonely world, where there was only light as a companion, and light that couldn't be seen by ordinary means, couldn't be called a world? "Who are you?" Feng Er turned her head and looked at him. "Me? I don't know. I've been here since I had consciousness. I've been floating for a long time. There's nothing but emptiness and endless darkness. I've been floating here for a long time. It wasn't until a long time later that I made the appearance just now." After a moment, Feng Er showed a silly smile. "I don't know who I am either." Yun Nuoshing was speechless. He almost fell into the abyss. Yes, this is my consciousness. The real me is there." Feng Er stretched out her slender finger and pointed downwards. Yun Nuoshing swallowed and turned his head in fear. To be honest, he was a little afraid of the space below. Who knew what else he could see? But since he had seen a ghost, he wouldn't be surprised if he saw something else. Then, he looked down behind him. As expected, he saw a lot of light. It pointed to the center where all the light converged, the center of the abyss. Chapter 1203. The dazzling, colorful light was the only thing in this eternal dark space, and it was also the most special thing. Buried in the dazzling sea of light was a ball, well, maybe a lump, an unknown object that looked like a solid or a liquid. It barely had the shape of a circle, but it was not a complete circle. It looked like a rhombus from above, but if it descended to the same level as the eye, it would look like an oval. That's right, it descended to the same level as the eye. Yun Nuoshing came to her senses and saw the unknown object squirming in front of her. It was only about 1,000 feet in size, but it had the concept of life. The colorful light formed a huge long belt, and one side was extremely close to the core. That's right, those lights were energy belt. At first, Yun Nuoshing thought that all the energy lights were bursting out from a single point, but in fact they were all closed belts connected from end to end. One end was very close to the core, just like the orbit of a planet orbiting the sun. "This is your original body?" Yun Nuoshing looked at the core from the corner of her eyes, and then glanced at Feng Er, who was 1 meter away from her, and asked, "Original body? I don't have an original body." It shook its head, its eyes flashing with a profound radiance. "Using your understanding, this is an aggregation of my concept. It is my existence in this world, a concrete yet illusory image manifested in this world. And this clone of mine is an even more concrete image of that. It knew a lot of things in a short period of time. Half an hour ago, it could only use the most straightforward and intuitive word. Now it could say some more profound words. Part of the reason was that it was an unusually special life form. Another part of the reason was it had also obtained 60% of the memories from Yun Nua planet. Later on, it had thought of a way to control it, but there was still no way to block the mind reading. This place was its territory, so it could not do anything about it. It was just that the owner of this place had some interest in him, which made him a little distressed. In a short while, he was pulled into the center of this abyss, which made him feel very troubled, and he didn't know how to sneak away. In fact, there was another reason why he was interested in this abyss black hole. When he entered this world that day, his consciousness was pulled to an unknown place for a short while. He heard the voice and saw something unknown. The most bizarre thing in this world was this abyss black hole. He thought that he could find the answer here. It seemed that he was thinking too much. Voice? You care about that voice a lot? Feng Er looked at him with her body tilted, blinking her eyes, and seemed to gradually become alive. I seem to know the voice you are talking about, I said. Yun Nuashing was stunned for a moment and shook his head with a bitter smile. Forget it, anyway. If he was not careful and did not control it well, he would expose a lot of things to it. He was also a little concerned about what it said just now, so he could not help but focus. You said, you know? What is that voice? Where is it? That strange void wandering was too strange, and he was very concerned about it. He had a sense of familiarity with that unknown thing from Yun Nuashing's previous life. He felt that he must figure it out, or he would not be able to sleep well. It's that thing. She scratched her head, and there was a trace of doubt on her face. I don't know what it is. It's not in your memory. It appeared here once, but it just flashed by. It's yes, something like you. Well, you call them humans, right? Yes, the appearance of humans. When it said that he was the same as that unknown thing, Yun Nuashing was really shocked, and almost had a heart attack. He thought that he was the same as that thing and was shocked. Then, in the next second, after listening to it, he heaved a sigh of relief. It turned out that the same thing meant that he and it were both of the human race, at least the appearance of that unknown thing was that of a human race. Well, it was really a useless clue. In your memory, it seems, yes, there's a little smell, a little bit of that feeling. There's a part of your memory that's very similar. Not long ago, you sensed a very similar smell. Feng suddenly opened her eyes wide, and stretched out her hands to gesture something. She was incoherently saying something about mirror, darkness, wind, and so on. It seemed that she was too excited and forgot how to use the nouns she knew. She could only describe it abstractly. Yun Nuashing tilted his head and thought for a long time. He put the words mirror, shattered, darkness, and wind together. He scratched his head and thought for a long time. Then, he connected it to the fact that it happened not long ago. He suddenly had a guess, and only one guess. The great void crack. That Supreme Suyao used a key to tear open a passage leading to the land of destruction in the void crack? Yes, that's what you think in your memory. She nodded vigorously and calmed down from her excited state. In the storm that you called the God-destroying storm, there's a similar smell. It's very similar. Yun Nuashing was shocked by her words. It's very similar to the smell in the God-destroying storm. The huge storm that was caused by the primordial great deities was very similar to the smell there. Damn it, could it be? Well, it's like a forest and a tree. Although they both have the same smell, they're not the same concept. She scratched her head again and messed up Feng Er's long hair. A tree is a tree and a forest is a forest. The latter is gathered by the former. They're not the same concept, but they have the same element. I understand what you mean. Yun Nuashing also calmed down and nodded. Maybe it's not completely what I thought. Maybe that smell is just referring to the smell of the primordial heavenly deity. Well, this news was not too good either. A primordial heavenly deity had come into contact with him. This was not good news no matter how you looked at it, especially when the primordial heavenly deity said to him, so familiar. Could it be that there was something on him that caught the primordial heavenly deity's attention? Then, Yun Nuashing tried hard to recall. 80% of the connection between the Dark Age and the mythological age was broken. There were not many things left, but there was still a part of it. He might have unintentionally done something, obtained something, or accidentally dug up the ancestral grave of the primordial heavenly deity. This was a bit ridiculous, but it was not completely impossible. In the distant realm of the gods, there was a place called the Twin Sage Hall. It was a force that was established less than 10 million years ago. However, 2 eras ago that place was a graveyard. A big tomb that buried the primordial heavenly deity was completely destroyed by a group of naughty children. The primordial heavenly deity was completely dead, and not even a trace of his breath was left behind. Now, only he and Hui still remembered the primordial heavenly deity. Back then, the two of them helped move the tomb, moved it to the tomb of the gods, on the other side of the realm of the gods. Only then did the primordial heavenly deity not die in peace. He just did not know if the primordial heavenly deity had left his body behind for some special purpose. Oh, his mind was a little out of control. Anyway, that was what it meant. Who knew if some peerless figure was buried in the place where he was living now? But no matter how hard Yun Nuoshing thought about it, he could not think of whether he had touched the primordial heavenly deity's things. Logically speaking, he should be able to sense the things left behind by such a figure just by standing here. The abnormal energy points in the realm of the gods, even if they were left behind by the primordial heavenly deity, would not be able to hide from his eyes, as long as he wanted to look at them. But he really did not. Hey, come back to your senses. Is your name Feng Ling or Quarter Moon or Strange Fellow? Why do you have so many code names? Its muttering voice pulled him back from his thoughts. As soon as he came back to his senses, he heard the former continue to say, "There are too many noises in your mind. Too many messy thoughts can't be put together. It's so noisy that I'm dying." Yun Nuoshing rolled his eyes. Sure enough, when his mind went out of control, it would leak out to Feng Ling uncontrollably. "I don't know about such complicated things." Feng Ling sat down lazily and looked at the nucleus that was surrounded by several energy rings in the distance. "I don't know anything. I can't touch anything. I'm still here. In my life, I've only come into contact with two things from the outside world. One is the voice that you mentioned. It left in a hurry. The other is you. It's so strange. You all are so busy, coming in a hurry and leaving in a hurry." Yun Nuoshing was silent for a while. He wanted to leave in a hurry, but he had to be able to leave first. "What do you want to know?" Yun Nuoshing asked softly. "What?" Feng Ling tilted its head and grinned, making Yun Nuoshing feel awkward. "I want to know everything. But it seems like I know everything." Yun Nuoshing rolled his eyes. That was nonsense. Feng Ling had instilled 60% of his memories. Basically, it knew everything he knew about the world and many other things. "So why did you ask me to come here?" Yun Nuoshing felt that his voice sounded a little broken. "Originally, I was a little interested in this dark. Oh, I mean your world. But it's different from what I imagined." "Ah, you're talking about that." Feng Ling scratched its head and grinned. "I was created by them, the people of the underworld that you mentioned. Well, it's a little strange. I always thought that I was born out of thin air. You're very worried about this world, this primordial realm. You want to find a way to solve the war that my creators started." Feng Ling shrugged. "But there's no way. I've never seen them. The influence of this small world that I'm in on this big world won't stop. I can't stop it either. At most, I can only let you come here safely, just like—" Feng Ling thought seriously for a while and nodded. "I'm just inviting you to visit." Yun Nuoshing, in other words, even if he was invited to visit, he couldn't tear down Feng Ling's home, right? Feng Ling wanted to, but he couldn't. "I'm just a conceptual being that manifested in the world. My actions have very little influence on the world." Feng Ling looked at him and said, "You came here with a little hope. I'm sorry to disappoint you. There's nothing here." "I didn't have much hope in the first place." Yun Nuoshing shrugged. Feng Ling suddenly showed a thoughtful expression. After being immersed for a while, Feng Ling suddenly exclaimed, "Ah, this place isn't completely unchanged. My creators used to throw some trash here. Let me think, that was the only time I threw that thing into the core. I don't know if they threw it in randomly or deliberately. But that day, they threw it in and left before they even got close to this place. I think they just threw it in and left in a hurry." "And then?" Yun Nuoshing's face was full of sweat. He was baffled. He didn't know what Feng Ling was trying to say. "Didn't you come here to seek hope? Maybe there's something special about that thing. Well, a lot of things that fell into my world were quickly dyed black and decomposed. The decomposed energy was transmitted to the outside world and has been affecting the outside world. Only that trash didn't change. It's still there. Feng Ling pulled Yun Nuoshing closer to the seemingly soft core and sensed it with rapt attention. It seemed to be searching for something in its body. Ugh, this description sounded disgusting, but it was indeed the expression. Yun Nuoshing's expression was inexplicable. That's your creator. If I really find any weakness about them from you, even if it's a weak point, it will be disadvantageous to them. Well then? Feng Ling nodded faintly. Its tone was so calm that it didn't seem to care at all. Yun Nuoshing was stunned. A few seconds later, he heard Feng Ling chuckle. Creators. Before you came, I didn't know who they were. I always thought that I was born out of thin air. In fact, it's true. They created this world, but they definitely didn't expect to give birth to a strange creature like me. We are connected by cause and effect, but in this world, we are like strangers. They are just another strange thing to me. Feng Ling thought for a while. He stared at Yun Nuoshing and said softly, It's just like what you said. What does this world have to do with me? I only follow my heart. Yun Nuoshing's cheeks trembled slightly. He remembered this sentence, but he couldn't remember the first time he said it. Now that he thought about it, he seemed to have said it several times. Ah, I found it. With a whoosh, like a balloon leaking air, the soft core turned from a faint black to brown, then to green, and finally to white. Then, one end bulged up high, and a circular opening opened up. Something slowly floated out from inside. Yun Nuoshing's cheeks twitched rapidly. He felt as if he saw someone who drank too much and ate too much vomiting crazily in front of him. His face turned green, purple, and then white. And he really vomited something out. Oh my God! Feng Ling sighed silently and looked at him unhappily. Can you not have such strange thoughts? But, okay, I was wrong. Yun Nuoshing waved his hand, not knowing whether to laugh or cry. What floated out of the core was a red thing. Even though it had been in this abnormal space for a long time, its surface was still glossy and full of color like a ruby. If the color was lighter, perhaps it could be used as a mirror. Furthermore, that thing looked a little familiar. It looked like a diamond-shaped crystal. The top and bottom were very long, and the middle was not very wide. Thinking back, a red diamond-shaped crystal that was full of luster. It had been placed in this place for countless years, and had not been contaminated by the power of the abyss death mist. It was also not affected by the energy disintegration rules that filled this place. This thing, Feng Ling touched his chin and said, I finally got it out. It was placed there for too long, and it actually got stuck. It seems like it wants to devour my energy, but it doesn't have much self-consciousness. It was just an unintentional action, so it didn't succeed. Was it a wrong decision to throw it into the core? What's wrong with you? You have a lot of complicated thoughts entering my consciousness. Yun Nuoshing raised his head and was dumbfounded. Cold sweat poured down like rain, and even his lips were trembling. This is the core of that supreme heavenly God, that great heavenly God's scepter. The core of that great heavenly God of destruction's scepter. Why did it appear in this place? According to his memory, this thing should still be lying in that place in the divine continent. Wait a minute, with this calculation, from beginning to end, he felt that he had seen through something at this moment. It's so messy. Hurry up and stop. My thoughts are so messy. He covered his head and grimaced, waking Yun Nuoshing up with a start. Wait a minute. Why did this thing that should not appear here at all appear in this place? Also, you said that the people of the underworld threw it in here? Yun Nuoshing hurriedly roared at him and asked. He was somewhat unable to organize the rest of his words, so he hurriedly threw the words out while his mind was still clear. What do you mean, how and why? He tilted his head. They threw it in here. They casually threw it in here like they were throwing trash. What's wrong with this thing? What great heavenly God of origins? What first heavenly God? Is so messy. The corner of Yun Nuoshing's mouth twitched. This was really a major event that would shock the Eight Elements world. If this thing was left here, it would explode sooner or later. If it exploded, would it completely destroy the thing that the people of the underworld had painstakingly created? Should he pretend that he did not know anything now? Wow. Is it that dangerous? Hurry up and take it away. All right, he did not have time to control his thoughts and was seen through by it. But why did it want him to take this dangerous thing away? This is something from the world of order. Of course, it will be affected if it is left here. But you are different. You are also something from the world of order. You will not be repelled, he said matter-of-factly. Yun Nuoshing held the red diamond-shaped crystal with both hands. The corner of his mouth could not stop twitching. He carefully lowered his head and looked at the thing. It was shiny and full of mysterious energy. It was completely incomprehensible. It did not release any light just now, but when it fell into his hands, it actually released a faint glow. It seemed to be true to its words. Because it was also something from the world of order, it would not be repelled. At this moment, Yun Nuoshing finally understood why it was so difficult for him to take it out when he had just spat it out. Because this thing was entangled with rules, karma, or something else. It was a moving representative. Haha. This was the core of the heavenly God's scepter of the first generation great heavenly God. If that heavenly God's scepter possessed half of the divine right of the origin great heavenly God, then this core probably possessed 1/4 or 1/8 of the great power. This kind of energy was really tempting. However, it was useless. The energy of this thing could not be activated, and he did not dare to activate it. He was very clear about the price of using the power of a god with the body of a mortal. Even if he was the heavenly God of origin now, correspondingly, he held the power of the origin great heavenly God in his hands. It was one of a kind. It was a power that was born when the world was created, or even before that. It was a power that could not be explained by any common sense. Under that power, compared to the power contained in this core, he was just a weak mortal. This thing. Sigh, it's called hope, but it's also a hopeless hope. The power of this thing is simply impossible to use. Yun Nuoshing frowned. Do you also think that it's very powerful? It nodded. I'm not too sure about your judgment. In any case, it's actually not broken down by the rules of disintegration here. That's a very powerful performance. Yun Nuoshing smiled bitterly. This thing was far beyond his imagination, and it was also far beyond his imagination. This thing carried endless hope, but it was just a decoration that made people stare at it helplessly. I don't understand. It looked at his unpredictable expression and scratched its head. Anyway, I'll give this thing to you. I don't want to keep such a dangerous thing. It's useless to give it to me. You can leave it here. Maybe one day they will react and come here to take it away. Yun Nuoshing rolled his eyes. He had a lot of doubts in his heart, and there were even more doubts that he could not clear up. Now, he could not even ask. The underworld had beings at the level of the heavenly God of origin. Would they not recognize this thing? He was not sure. Perhaps there were more complicated problems in this. He could not delve into it now, and he was not qualified to delve into it now. You're tuning in to the Phoenix Nights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.